Chapter 594. The person outside walked in at that moment. Upon closer inspection, it was a Taoist who was 8 feet tall and had a stern expression. The Taoist wore a crown with 3 skulls and 100 towers. His face was long, and he had a long beard. He wore a black robe and held a horsetail whisk in his hand. His aura was suffocating. The Taoist immediately noticed the black water Taoist as soon as he entered. The Taoist said in surprise, "There's someone else in the divine contingency gate?" The Taoist figure flashed and instantly appeared in front of the Blackwater Taoist. The Blackwater Taoist did not dare to move in front of the Taoist. He knew very well that the Taoist was much more powerful than his master. The Taoist might even be a legendary immortal. Therefore, the Taoist reacted quickly. He immediately knelt on the ground and bowed. Disciple of the Divine Contingency Gate, Blackwater greets senior expert. Keeping a low profile was the only way to survive. The Blackwater Taoist knew this well. The black-robed Taoist remained expressionless. He only glanced at the Taoist and asked, "Is there anyone else in your Blackwater Taoist?" The Taoist quickly shook his head. "No, I'm the only one left." The Taoist sighed. "This is the fall of the immortal path. The all-powerful divine contingency gate has declined just like that. It's truly unpredictable. However, the divine contingency gate sure knows how to hide. You're actually hiding in this valley. If not for the demonic artifact breaking out of the formation and revealing its aura, I wouldn't have been able to detect it." He looked at the black iron glove in the Taoist's hand. The Taoist was quite quick-witted. Although he was very reluctant, he did not hesitate to respectfully offer the black glove with both hands. "Ah, you're quite perceptive," the old Taoist priest said as he stretched out his hand to take it. Then he smiled and said, "This is a good item. Back then, the Ghost Hand Demon Lord's famed magical treasure was forged from nether ghost iron and the souls of tens of thousands of people. Its power was boundless. Later on, the Demon Lord was killed by the divine contingency sect's Taoist master miracle hand." The Taoist was talking to himself, but the Taoist was dumbfounded. While he was frightened, he was also overwhelmed with emotions. He suddenly discovered an opportunity to reach the peak and embark on the supreme path. The Taoist immediately made a decision. He knelt down again and kowtowed. The old Taoist was stunned. He squinted at the man from the Blackwater River and asked, "What are you doing?" Taoist Blackwater hurriedly said, "Senior, the divine contingency sect has fallen. Now that I've seen your immortal glory, I'm filled with admiration. I'm willing to offer everything in the divine contingency sect to you. I only hope that you can take pity on me and accept me as your disciple." Then he kowtowed again. Taoist Blackwater had thought far ahead. First of all, he had given up everything in the divine armament sect. This was because he couldn't protect it at all. Instead of that, he might as well give it away first. This way, he might be able to gain some goodwill for himself. There was also the matter of apprenticeship. On one hand, Blackwater Taoist wanted to find a more powerful backer, and on the other hand, he wanted to save himself. The old Taoist in front of him did not look like a good person. Even if the old Taoist killed him and took everything from the Divine Machine sect, what could the Blackwater Taoist do? Stop him? That was courting death. Hence, only by begging to be apprenticed would he have a chance of survival. After all, if he didn't do this, the old Taoist would most likely kill him. Blackwater Taoist was an evil man, and this old Taoist wasn't a good person either. There was no mistake in judging others by their own standards. Sure enough, Blackwater Taoist had just taken a trip to the gates of hell. The old Taoist stared at Blackwater for a long time before his murderous aura dissipated. "Kid, you're quite sensible. That's good too. Now that the immortal and demonic sects can only linger on in the foreign lands, it's getting harder and harder to recruit disciples who dare not step foot into Middle-earth. That damned immortal devouring beast. Forget it. Let's not talk about it. Come back with me." Blackwater Taoist was beyond excited. But whether it was real or not, he didn't know. Maybe it was real, or maybe it was just an act. But there was no doubt that Blackwater Taoist had discovered a whole new world. He was now certain that this new master of his was an immortal. Black Wind Cave. Inside Taoist, whose cave abode, Lin Jin had a room to himself. The stone room was currently humid, and the walls were covered in dew. Apart from that, there was also a lot of water spirit energy floating in the air. Some of them took the form of tiny water dragons, while others took the form of fishes and prawns. These were the supernatural powers of the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. They weren't real living creatures or water spirits. Right now, Lin Jin was studying the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. To him, this was a true magical artifact. It was more than one realm higher than the immortal binding rope. It was precisely because of this that Lin Jin still hadn't found a way to completely refine this magical artifact. Only by completely refining it could he use all of its supernatural powers. Otherwise, he would end up like Blackwater Taoist, using the Four Seas Freedom Gourd to nourish his body and extend his lifespan. That was all. Lin Jin had once taken out the water reservoir armor to see if there was a connection between the two treasures. But it was clearly wishful thinking. In the end, Lin Jin made no progress after one day and night. At least, it wasn't the progress he had in mind. On the second night, Lin Jin only snapped out of his daze when the visitation hall's doors opened. He had completely forgotten about the visitation hall. Recently, the visitation hall was rather quiet. The visitors were all familiar faces, and most of them were here to ask about beast appraisals or to chat about recent developments. Zhao Jingyan of Phoenix Palace had regained control of Phoenix Palace and gained the support of several elders. Now, she was on the rise again. Of course, consolidating Phoenix Palace wasn't something that could be done overnight, but it was foreseeable that Phoenix Palace's rise would be a major event in the near future. And then there was Feng Ziqian. The kid had been living comfortably recently. Due to curator support, Feng Ziqian was gradually being put in an important position by Emperor Feng Junwu. His marriage with the Thousand Island Kingdom's princess had also been settled. To others, Feng Ziqian was already half a step into the throne. As long as he didn't court death, it wouldn't be a problem for him to become Emperor Tianxian in a few years. Although Lin Jin had left Tianxian Royal City, the legacy he and curator left behind was enough to bring Feng Ziqian immense benefits. For example, because of Lin Jin, the entire Tianxian Academy was now on Feng Ziqian's side. This was a force that shouldn't be underestimated. It could even be the key to success or failure. After all, the Academy included the transcendent existence known as Miniature Library. He Qing, Yi Yuzhou, Black Crow, Madame Ghostchild, Old Tian, Jiang Ziki, and the others didn't have any special matters to attend to. However, Yi Yuzhou would always ask curator when appraiser Lin would return to the Jade Dragon Kingdom in Maple City. Yi Yuzhou wasn't the only one who wanted to know. Jade Dragon Kingdom's emperor, He Qian, was probably yearning for Lin Jin's return as well. Chapter 595. After all, everyone knew that Lin Jin was now a rank 4 beast appraiser. As long as he returned to the Jade Dragon Kingdom, it would only take some time before Jade Dragon Kingdom became a premium country once again. However, Lin Jin wasn't in a hurry. Seeing that it was time for the visitation hall's reopening, Lin Jin pondered for a moment before putting the Four Seas Freedom Gourd away and stepping inside. He had made up his mind. He would ask around once he entered the visitation hall. If there wasn't anything else, he planned to come out earlier. This way, he could continue studying the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. However, when Lin Jin put on the curator's mask and entered the visitation hall, he was stunned, because the scene in the visitation hall was far beyond Lin Jin's expectations. On the ground were a few people. They were Yi Yuzhou, Black Crow, and the others. He Qing was tending to them, while Madame Ghostchild seemed injured. Old Tian was sprawled on the ground, unmoving. Feng Ziqian stood behind Zhao Jingyan and argued with the two people in front of him. Zhao Jingyan's face was filled with anger, but also fear and helplessness. What was going on? Under the mask, Lin Jin frowned. Standing opposite him were two people, a man and a woman. Both were dressed in long robes and exuded a powerful aura. The man had a giant berserk lion by his side, while the woman had nothing around her. She was alone. They were different. These two were different from the others. Although at first glance, they looked like they had 2 arms and 2 legs, upon closer inspection, one would notice something special about them. Be it their clothes or hair, they were untainted by the mundane world. At that instant, Lin Jin's heart skipped a beat as he recalled a phrase. Immaculate body. Lin Jin had read Taoist scriptures before. He had also studied books from the ancient era of immortals. He knew that after becoming an immortal, one would have to undergo a lightning tribulation to attain an immaculate body. It was also known as an immaculate immortal body. This was the biggest difference between immortals and mortals. That was how Lin Jin felt when he saw these 2 newcomers. However, based on the situation, it seemed like a conflict had just broken out. These thoughts only flashed through her mind for a split second. In fact, when Lin Jin pushed open the curator's iron door and entered the visitation hall, He Qing was the first to notice him and asked for his help. "Curator, we didn't do anything. These 2 newbies attacked us the moment they arrived." He Qing looked as if she had found her pillar of support and hurriedly complained. Everyone, including Black Crow, Madame Ghostchild, Yi Yuzhou, Zhao Jingyan, and Feng Ziqian, breathed a sigh of relief when they saw Curator, let alone He Qian. They were obviously extremely nervous before this. The reality of the situation was also obvious. They had so many people, but they were actually no match for those 2 people. Moreover, based on Lin Jin's observation, there was only one person who did this. He single-handedly suppressed experts like Yi Yuzhou, Black Crow, and Madame Ghostchild. He was not afraid of Zhao Jingyan at all. In this world, other than immortals, there was no other existence with such godly might. But Lin Jin was puzzled. Weren't immortals all extinct? The only immortal Lin Jin had ever met was the one from Daoyuo Temple. But after hiding for 1,000 years, that immortal was still destroyed by a rank 9 immortal devouring beast. But even then, Lin Jin understood the might of an immortal. It could be said that other than that perverted immortal devouring beast, immortals were the most powerful beings in this world. But didn't immortals only exist in legends and books? Why would they come to his visitation hall? For a moment, Lin Jin's mind was in a complete mess. But no matter what, Lin Jin had to figure out the situation first. Also, Lin Jin was a little angry. Whether or not these 2 newbies were immortals aside, even if they were, they had to behave themselves in the visitation hall and act according to his rules. In fact, when Curator appeared, the 2 immortals immediately turned to look at him. Lin Jin had once read that immortals' eyes glowed with divine light. Now, it seemed like it was true. It was Lin Jin's first time going up against immortals, not to mention 2 at once. Even in the visitation hall, Lin Jin felt as if he was facing a formidable foe. Hence, with every step Lin Jin took, his aura increased exponentially. It wasn't just his own, but he was also borrowing the museum's power to strengthen himself. Only then could he suppress them. The 2 immortals frowned as well. They were pulled into this strange place out of the blue, so they thought they were under attack. Hence, they had been on guard ever since they arrived. Upon seeing the others, one of the immortals attacked and defeated them all. Of course, not all of them. At least among these mortals, there was a woman who was quite capable. She managed to fend them off with her pet beast. These people told them that this place was called the Visitation Hall, and the owner of this place was known as Curator. He was a contemporary expert. Upon hearing this, the 2 immortals sneered, completely disdainful. In the eyes of immortals, mortals were nothing but ants. Although the 2 immortal sects they belonged to had long since hidden in the depths of the Black Mountain in the outer regions due to a huge incident 1,000 years ago, and had not set foot in Central Plains for 1,000 or 2,000 years, 2,000 or 3,000 years were just a little bit of time in the eyes of immortals. In their eyes, they had never treated mortals as anything. The 2 immortals thought it would be fine if the so-called Curator didn't show up. But if he did, they would capture him and interrogate him about what kind of evil tricks he used to transport them here. And now, the Curator was here. The male immortal sneered. "What Curator? You're just trying to be mysterious. Come here." As he spoke, the male immortal reached out and grabbed at the air as if trying to grab the Curator. An invisible force immediately enveloped Lin Jin. Truth be told, Lin Jin was startled too. Although he wasn't weak, he was still intimidated by a real immortal. It was just that it was impossible for him to keep the peace. The other party was a rash person who would make a move as soon as they arrived. If this important matter was captured, the curator would lose all face. Hence, while Lin Jin looked like he wasn't moving, he had in fact channeled all the museum's power into his body. More importantly, he was now wearing the real curator's mask. In addition, Lin Jin secretly channeled his strength. If he was still captured like this, Lin Jin would admit defeat. The next moment, the male immortal's mana touched Lin Jin. It was as if an invisible hand had grabbed Lin Jin. The force was so strong that it was suffocating. However, this feeling only lasted for a split second before an even stronger force shattered the male immortal's mana. Chapter 596. A look of disbelief appeared on the male immortal's face. As if he had been hit by an invisible force, he stumbled back 4 steps. At the same time, the male immortal felt the blood in his body ripple. His throat felt dry, and he almost spat out a mouthful of immortal blood. Fortunately, he wanted to save face. If he spat it out, he wouldn't have the face to live anymore. Especially in front of the famous Yinshang, he couldn't afford to lose face. Hence, even if he had to risk his life, the male immortal forcefully swallowed the mouthful of blood. However, his expression didn't look too good. Just as he was about to order the large liger beast beside him to step forward, he realized that the liger beast was also fearful. It was actually retreating, its hind legs trembling. At that moment, Chun Xiankong didn't dare to say anything else. The female immortal who had been watching from the beginning to the end was shocked. She clearly knew the male immortal and knew his background. Chun Xiankong was an immortal of the Xiandao sect. Among the sects hidden in Black Mountain, he was considered one of the top ones. Who would have thought that the curator would defeat Chun Xiankong the moment he appeared? The curator didn't even have to do anything. What kind of supernatural power was this? She couldn't believe it. At this moment, Fairy Yun Shang, who was originally cold and arrogant, subconsciously retracted her arrogance and lowered her posture a little. This was purely a form of respect. Yin Shang knew that Chen Xuankong's abilities were on par with hers. If this mysterious curator could injure Chen Xiankong without batting an eyelid, it wouldn't be difficult for him to take care of her. Perhaps he was a great immortal like her master. If that was the case, she had to give him the respect he deserved. At this thought, Yin Shang reacted quickly. She stepped forward and performed a Taoist sect etiquette. Cloud Path Immortal Sect's 34th generation's chief disciple, Qin Yun Shang, greets senior curator. His tone was gentle, and he spoke with the attitude of a junior. Although it was a simple greeting, it was enough to show that the curator had gained the female immortal's approval. Lin Jin wasn't the only one who understood this. Everyone else, including He Qing, Black Crow, and Yi Yuzhou, understood this as well. In fact, Lin Jin was sweating profusely just now, but he was satisfied with the result. As expected, I call the shots in my territory. This is the visitation hall, so even immortals have to behave themselves. In a man's territory, dragons must coil up and tigers must lie down. That's right, I'm the visitation hall. Lin Jin's confidence soared. He asked coldly, "Why did you hurt him?" As he spoke, Lin Jin walked over to check on their injuries. Old Tian was knocked out, and his pet beast was badly injured. Fortunately, they were in the visitation hall, so Lin Jin was able to wake Old Tian up with a simple trick. Then, with a wave of his hand, a colorful mist sprayed out to heal the injured humans and pet beasts. A shocking scene occurred. Both the man and the pet beast were recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Upon seeing this scene, Qin Yunshang's eyes lit up. Even Chun Xiankong was shocked, and fear covered his face. Even they couldn't do it. Not to mention them, even their master couldn't do it. This kind of healing technique was simply inconceivable. Little did they know that this was the Four Seas Freedom Gourd's innate ability. It was also the most powerful skill Lin Jin could use with this artifact. Any more, and Lin Jin might not be able to do it. But even so, It was enough for Lin Jin to put on an act. Chen Xiankong came to his senses as well. He would be too stupid if he didn't come to his senses after experiencing this. How could someone who could cultivate to become an immortal be so stupid? Chen Xiankong immediately bowed. Greetings, Senior. Xian Immortal Sect's 36th generation head disciple, Chen Xiankong. I didn't know what was going on and offended you. Please punish me. As for hurting you, that was purely a misunderstanding. Chen Xiankong forced himself to speak. Come to think of it, it really was a misunderstanding that he had hurt the other visitors. Misunderstanding? Lin Jin clearly didn't believe him. But once he understood the situation, he sighed helplessly, musing that it really was a misunderstanding. Although Chen Xiankong was hot-tempered and arrogant, he wasn't the type to hurt someone on the spur of the moment. Also, with his cultivation level, if he really did get physical, the other visitors wouldn't just be injured. After all, anyone would be nervous and suspicious after being pulled into the visitation hall out of the blue. If they weren't careful, a fight might break out. Back then, didn't Yu Zhou and Madame Ghostchild get into a fight because of this? According to the visitation hall's rules, newcomers had to be educated. Old Tian was the one who suggested this, because he was the one who had been taught a lesson back then. This time, they finally noticed that there were newcomers. Doors 11 and 12 were pushed open at the same time, and a person walked in. At that time, Old Tian was very excited. He wanted to show off his status as a veteran, so he volunteered to put on an act. However, this depended on who he was dealing with. It was one thing to deal with a regular expert, but one could imagine what would happen if they tried to put on airs in front of a proper immortal. With just one move, Chen Xiankong defeated Old Tian, which led to the subsequent battle. In the end, Chen Xiankong single-handedly suppressed all the other visitors. Had it not been for Curator's timely arrival, who knew what would have happened? Lin Jin had been listening from the beginning to the end. The expression under his mask was one of utter helplessness. Regardless, things weren't at the point where they couldn't be cleaned up yet. He needed to learn more about these two newcomers. Lin Jin was too curious about them. Weren't immortals extinct? Why did they appear again? Where were they hiding then? Also, from what Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong said, they each had their own school of immortality, which still existed. Incredible. This was big news. When Lin Jin realized this, his heart pounded with excitement. It couldn't be helped. If immortal schools really existed, the current state of affairs would be overturned. In front of an immortal, a high-class country was not worth mentioning at all. Lin Jin was curious, but he couldn't show it. An expert had to act like one. Hence, Lin Jin woke Old Tian up to treat his injuries and mediate the conflict between the two parties. After all, it wasn't a deep grudge. With Curator's name, there was no way the two parties wouldn't disrespect him. However, while the conflict had been resolved, the grudge was still there. Since it couldn't be resolved anytime soon, Lin Jin couldn't be bothered. He couldn't wait to start asking about the two immortals and their corresponding immortal sections. It wasn't just Lin Jin. Yu Zhou and the others were getting more and more impatient as well. The extinction of immortals happened a year or two ago. There shouldn't be any immortals left in this world now. Hence, they perked up their ears, eager to learn the truth. One could imagine how explosive this truth was. Chapter 597. The ancient path of immortals had once flourished for 100,000 years. But after the fall of immortals, there were very few historical records regarding this incident. Even if there were, it was only briefly mentioned. No one wrote about it in detail, so the later generations knew very little. The fall of immortals became an unsolved mystery. Of course, Lin Jin knew more. He knew that the main cause of the fall of immortals was most likely that rank 9 immortal devouring beast. Until now, the immortal devouring beast had yet to reveal its true form. Lin Jin only saw a giant claw back at Daluo Temple. Based on the information collected from various sources, the truth of the matter had been revealed. Thousands of years ago, the rank 9 immortal devouring beast appeared and attacked immortal sects indiscriminately, killing immortals. This cruel war may have lasted for centuries. In the end, The immortals were defeated, and the path of immortals fell. This was what Lin Jin knew. There might be a small number of immortals who survived, such as the immortal from Daluo Temple. However, they could only hide and conceal their auras. Because once their immortal aura was exposed, the rank 9 immortal devouring beast would be attracted and death would be their only outcome. Hence, Lin Jin assumed that there were no more immortals left in this world. Even more extreme speculations were that the immortal from Daluo Temple was the last. But now, 2 immortals had come to the visitation hall. One could only imagine how much of an uproar this had caused. After Lin Jin questioned them, Qin Yunshang and Chun Xiankong explained the situation to him. It turned out that when the rank 9 immortal devouring beast went on a rampage 2,000 years ago, a small number of immortal sects with foresight had already begun preparing for their retreat. Since they were no match for the immortal devouring beast, they could only flee. The problem was, where could they flee to? The edge of each continent was known as the extraterritorial lands. The extraterritorial lands were filled with endless miasma and were extremely dangerous. Since ancient times, it had been a forbidden area. Mortals and beasts could never enter. If they did, they would instantly be poisoned to death by the miasma unless they had some sort of treasure or other means to restrain the miasma. Even immortals needed special dharma artifacts and detoxification immortal pills. Back then, the immortal Dao sects had been slaughtered by the immortal devouring beasts and were in a sorry state. Out of 100 immortals, it was already a miracle that one managed to escape alive. The immortals who were lucky enough to escape had barged into the outer realm with the mentality that they were lucky. They hadn't expected that they would actually be able to avoid the immortal devouring beast pursuit. It seemed that the miasma in the outer realm had provided them with protection. In short, the immortal devouring beast could not lock onto the aura of immortals in the outer realm. In this way, the miasma-filled outer realm became a refuge for the immortal Dao sections. Some immortals of the sects escaped into the miasma-filled outer realm, re-establishing their sects there and rebuilding their sections. To put it bluntly, he had found a place to linger on his last breath. These immortals had secretly snuck back to the Middle Earth with hopes of getting lucky, but without exception, all of them never returned. After that, no immortals dared to try again. Just like that, the outer world and the Middle Earth were separated. There weren't many celestial sects that had the chance to escape and rebuild their sects in the outer realm. The Xian Dao School and the Cloud Dao School were 2 of them. This was the conclusion Lin Jin came up with after listening to Qin Yunshang and Chan Xuankong's explanation and combining it with what he knew before. In that case, for the past 2,000 years, you've been hiding in that foreign land? Lin Jin asked after listening to their conversation. The 2 immortals who had been subdued by Lin Jin nodded at once. Senior, that's right. The 2 immortals were respectful before the curator. Compared to Lin Jin and the others' curiosity, these 2 immortals were just as curious. To them, the curator must be an immortal. Otherwise, how could he suppress them so easily? Also, he wasn't an average pseudo-immortal. He must be at least a true immortal. But the problem was, the curator's name had never been heard of in the outer realm. Based on the curator's words, they knew nothing about the outer realm. In other words, the curator was from Middle-earth. But how is that possible? Other than the outer realm, immortals would be mercilessly slaughtered by the immortal devouring beast the moment they showed themselves. There were no exceptions. This was what they were most curious about. Finally, Qin Yunshang couldn't help but ask, Senior, how did you avoid the immortal devouring beast attack? The premise of this question was that the curator was an immortal. Lin Jin could tell. There's no need to hide because I'm not an immortal. Lin Jin thought about it and decided there was no need to pretend. There was no benefit to it, and he had to think of a way to cover up his lie. It was tiring. Instead of that, he might as well tell the truth. Lin Jin wasn't an immortal to begin with. Upon hearing this answer, Qin Yunshang and Chun Xiankong were shocked, especially Chun Xiankong, who immediately said, That's impossible. Senior, you're at least a true immortal. Otherwise, how could you break my dragon catcher so easily? I'm really not. Lin Jin continued to deny it. However, Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong didn't believe him at all. They were now convinced that this mysterious curator was definitely an expert at the true immortal level. Not only could he open up a world of his own, the visitation hall, but he could also avoid the immortal devouring beast attack. In an instant, the curator's image in the two immortals' minds grew larger and more imposing. Lin Jin now knew what he needed to know. Lin Jin had to admit that the newcomers to the visitation hall this time were an eye-opener. It was as if he had opened the door to a whole new world. Who would have thought that an immortal sect that should have retired from the stage of history would still exist? Perhaps I'll have to find some time to pay it a visit, Lin Jin mumbled to himself. According to Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong, even to immortals like them, the outworld was an extremely dangerous place. Not only was there an endless miasma that spread for thousands of miles, but there were also all sorts of ferocious beasts lurking about. None of the beasts in the outworld were kind, and many of them could even devour immortals. It was obvious how terrifying they were. Although the newcomers this time were unusual, Lin Jin remained as steady as a mountain. He had told them the rules that should be followed in the visitation hall, no matter who they were. Of course, Lin Jin would give them benefits of equal value as a visitor of the visitation hall. Suddenly, Lin Jin recalled the bottleneck he encountered when he was refining the Four Seas calabash. With a sudden inspiration, he asked Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong about refining artifacts. As it turned out, Lin Jin had asked the right people. The mysterious Path School and the cloudy Path School were famous existences during the golden age of immortals. Both of them had many secret techniques for refining artifacts. As the cornerstones of the two immortal sects, Qin Yunshang and Chen Xuankong's knowledge was naturally very profound and extensive. Now that the true immortal expert in their minds was testing them, the two of them naturally revealed everything they knew and answered respectfully. Chapter 598. Lin Jin realized that it was the right decision not to explain that he wasn't an immortal. Otherwise, these two immortals wouldn't be so eager to answer his questions. After listening to so many energy cultivation techniques, Lin Jin felt enlightened and even benefited a lot from it. Many of the questions he had stumbled upon before were now solved, and he had figured out how to refine the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. Lin Jin was overwhelmed with emotions. He couldn't wait to go back and give it a try. Since it was about time, Lin Jin bid farewell and left. Before he left, he told Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong that they could ask him anything regarding pet beasts. Once Lin Jin left in a hurry, Yi Yuzhou, Zhao Jingyan, and the others swarmed over to ask the two immortals questions. The two immortals were curious about the current situation in Middle-earth. With the curator intimidating presence, the two of them no longer put on airs as immortals and began conversing with each other as equals. Friendship grew out of fight. The only one who was depressed was old Tion. He had put on an act to bully the newcomer, but he ended up going for wool and coming home shorn. Instead, he was taught a lesson. Now, he could only grit his teeth and swallow his pride. Fortunately, it wasn't a big deal. Old Tion felt that he was quite broad-minded. Meanwhile, after exiting the visitation hall, Lin Jin immediately began refining the Four Seas Freedom Gourd according to the two immortals' instructions. As he had been accumulating energy for several days, Lin Jin was only at a bottleneck. Now that he had succeeded, his progress was swift. In just a few hours, he had successfully refined the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. The moment he succeeded, the Four Seas Freedom Gourd glowed brilliantly. At the same time, Lin Jin took out the water reservoir armor and used a special seal to imprint it onto the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. The two water element treasures he fused instantly. This was a reforging technique. For this, Lin Jin had to open the visitation hall's door to borrow its power to continue the refinement process. All of a sudden, the stone chamber was filled with all sorts of water spirits, and the pleasant sound of surging tides filled his ears. Under the influence of the water spirit energy, Lin Jin felt his body being tempered once more. It was as if he had been reborn. It was a wonderful feeling, and only Lin Jin could feel the benefits. His cultivation had definitely improved, but Lin Jin couldn't tell by how much. All he knew was that his strength had increased by several folds. Even without spells, Lin Jin felt that he should be able to take on a rank 2 pet beast in melee combat. He opened his palm, and the Four Seas Freedom gourd floated down. Then, all the water, spiritual energy, and phenomenon in the stone chamber were sucked into the gourd. In the past, Lin Jin would never have been able to do this. Meanwhile, inside Black Wind Cave, the monsters were methodically renovating the cave. According to the new cave master's request, Black Wind Cave was to be turned into a proper sect for monster cultivators. Hence, the entrance to the cave had to be refurbished. In addition, the cave also had to build a training hall and a library. For the past few days, the monsters in Black Wind Cave had been working tirelessly. In addition, it was the hottest and driest season of the year in Liangzhou. The scorching heat outside was unbearable. If an egg was dropped on the ground, it would be fried in an instant. Hence, even inside Black Wind Cave, it was stifling hot. The monsters were drenched in sweat from the heat. Some of them had already taken off their clothes. For a moment, humanoid monsters with black, yellow, and mixed fur could be seen pacing back and forth. It was a sight to behold. When Lin Jin came out of the cave, he frowned at the sight. However, sensing the stifling heat, Lin Jin understood. With a flip of the Four Seas unrestrained gourd in his hand, an unbelievably cool breeze swept out. In an instant, the heat in the cave was swept away. The monsters were shocked. When they saw their new cave master, they recalled the new rules he had set down. One by one, they either nimbly or clumsily came over to greet him. "Greetings, cave master." The sight of monsters of all shapes and sizes bowing in unison was a sight to behold. Taoist, who hurried over as well. He had been waiting for Lin Jin to come out of seclusion for the past few days. "Brother Tiger, come with me," Lin Jin called out. Taoist, who didn't understand, but he nodded anyway. With a wave of his hand, Lin Jin summoned a cloud that swept him and Taoist, who up. Moments later, they flew out of Black Wind Cave. Lin Jin's cloud mist was still the same cloud mist. But after refining the Four Seas unrestrained gourd, Lin Jin was able to cast the cloud mist with ease. Its power had also increased by more than 10 times. Even Taoist, who was dumbfounded, feeling astounded. Truth be told, Lin Jin's cloud mist was only passable to him. While it was magical, it wasn't amazing. But this time, the same spell gave him a bigger shock. In the blink of an eye, he found himself thousands of feet up in the air. Beneath his feet was the desolate Liangzhou territory. Lin Jin stood with his hands behind his back, his expression filled with unprecedented confidence. After all, he had successfully refined the Four Seas unrestrained gourd. Only by truly refining it would he know how powerful the gourd was. It was because of this confidence that Lin Jin had such confidence. Truth be told, Lin Jin couldn't wait for the corpse cultivator to come looking for him. That way, he could just kill him and get rid of this threat. However, the corpse cultivator was well hidden. Given the vastness of the world, if he insisted on hiding, Lin Jin wouldn't be able to find him. On the other hand, Lin Jin had a rough idea of the other strong enemy, Patriarch Xue Pao's location. After Liangzhou's matter was settled, Lin Jin planned to look for Patriarch Xue Pao and get rid of this troublemaker. Back then, Patriarch Xue Pao had threatened Lin Jin many times. Since Lin Jin didn't wait for the man to come for revenge, he would take the initiative to deliver himself to him. Let's see if Patriarch Xue Pao would fulfill his promise and eliminate Lin Jin. Lin Jin raised his palm, and the cloud beneath his feet rose rapidly. They were now thousands of feet up in the air. Taoists who had never been to this height before. Just the strong wind was enough to make them lose their footing. Fortunately, both Lin Jin and Taoist, who had high cultivation levels, so they were able to keep their footing. Looking down from 1,000 feet in the air, one could see almost half of the Liang province. The vastness of the land was simply breathtaking. Taoist, who was also dumbfounded. While he was excited, he couldn't help but feel his hands and feet go soft. Clearly, Taoist who didn't know that he was afraid of heights. Liangzhou is a dangerous place. One of the reasons is the lack of rain. Back then, you placed the Four Seas unrestrained gourd in Liangzhou because you wanted to use this artifact to change Liangzhou's climate. But for some reason, you failed. Now that I've obtained this artifact, I should fulfill your wish. Lin Jin spouted nonsense. Back then, Taoist who did hide the Four Seas unrestrained gourd in Liangzhou, but he never mentioned that he wanted to change Liangzhou's geography and climate. Lin Jin was merely making up an excuse for what he was about to do. Chapter 599. Taoist who nodded blankly. With a wave of Lin Jin's sleeve, the clouds in the sky converged. First, it was white clouds, then it turned into a thunderstorm. This time, Taoist who was truly dumbfounded. In the time it took to brew a pot of tea, a heavy downpour began. Taoist who knew what Lin Jin was trying to do. He was basically borrowing the power of his artifact to summon the clouds and rain. However, Taoist who shook his head. Although rain can solve an emergency, it's not a long-term solution. No matter how much rain falls, it will eventually stop. When that happens, Liangzhou will still be the same Liangzhou. Taoist who had stayed in Liangzhou for a longer period of time. Throughout his long life, Liangzhou had experienced several heavy downpours that lasted for several days. But in the end, other than a few floods, Liangzhou remained unchanged. Or perhaps, Brother Lin, you could stay in Liangzhou and confer rain on Buyun every now and then. Taoist whose question made Lin Jin fall into deep thought. The rain stopped and the clouds dispersed. Lin Jin knew that Taoist who was right. Just then, Lin Jin glanced around and noticed a huge valley basin in the distance. This terrain must have been created by a meteorite crashing down 10,000 years ago. If Lin Jin had been standing on land, he wouldn't have been able to make out the terrain. Only by flying 10,000 feet in the air could he have a clear view of the entire basin. At this sight, an idea suddenly came to Lin Jin. Flying above the basin, Lin Jin looked down to get a better look at the bowl-shaped terrain. A smile appeared on Lin Jin's face as he nodded. Great place. Taoist who was puzzled. What kind of place is that? Instead of explaining, Lin Jin said, Brother Tiger, please wait here for a moment. Having said that, a cloud separated from his body and descended rapidly. Less than 100 feet above the basin, Lin Jin steadied himself and closed his eyes, activating his beast deterrence ability. Vaguely, a door could be seen behind him. In addition, flames rose around Lin Jin and his blood energy surged. Even the breezy monster sword at his waist was humming. The moment Lin Jin opened his eyes, an invisible aura engulfed 100 miles of the basin. After a short period of silence, the ground in the valley began to shake and countless dust rose. It turned out that the insects, birds, and beasts that lived here had all fled. There were many snakes and insects here, as well as wild camels and desert goat beasts. There were quite a number of them who had been hiding in the shadows, but Lin Jin had chased them out. The scene was spectacular. Once the beasts were gone, Lin Jin took out the Four Seas Freedom Gourd and tossed it into the air before invoking a spell. Art of Falling Sea. The Four Seas Freedom Gourd flew into the clouds and grew 1,000 times larger. In the sky, at the end of the clouds, a huge gourd appeared. The next instant, Lin Jin changed his incantation and the gourd opened with a bang. Then, an endless amount of water poured out. From afar, it looked like water falling from the heavens. It was a spectacular sight. At this moment, the only thing that could be heard was the sound of water splashing. It was as if the Milky Way was bursting. This commotion had alarmed most of Liangzhou. After all, there were still some hidden experts cultivating in Liangzhou, including monsters like Black Wind Cave. Even some merchant caravans were alerted. In a mountain village 100 miles away, an old Taoist hurriedly ran out of a house. Then, he pinched his fingers together to calculate, and his expression changed. He immediately summoned an eagle beast, leaped onto it, and rode the eagle into the sky to rush over. 200 miles to the west, a giant golden-winged rock flew out of the cave on a cliff, heading toward the giant gourd in the distance. 50 miles to the east, A merchant caravan with 100 land beasts was slowly advancing on a trade route. The commotion caused by the falling water and the giant gourd in the air shocked the caravan so much that they stopped in their tracks to watch. The merchant guards were also dumbfounded. They had lived for so long, but they had never seen such a shocking scene. The pupils of the guard in charge of escorting the caravan narrowed. He immediately gave an order and mounted a swift wind horse. Tugging on the reins, he galloped over. The speed of this swift wind horse was extremely fast. It could cover a distance of a few dozen miles in just a moment. At this moment, anyone who heard about the phenomenon and had the slightest bit of ability were madly rushing in that direction. Many of them were hesitant, but it was clear that this could be a fortuitous encounter, or they could witness a miracle. Therefore, even if it was risky, there were still people who were willing to go and take a look. Some people thought about it again and decided not to go. But no matter what, the scene of the gourd hanging in the sky and the surging of the heavenly river would surely be recorded in the annals of history of Liang province, and it would become a great event that shook the heavens and the earth. Lord Hu landed beside Lin Jin as well, gaping at the scene before him. Even though he had lived for 500 years, he had never seen such a scene, because even his master, Dalord, couldn't do this with the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. However, Lin Jin didn't explain this to Taoist Hu. Having re-refined the Four Seas Freedom Gourd, Lin Jin's control and understanding of the artifact might even surpass Dalord's. After all, Lin Jin had obtained an orthodox immortal sex refinement method. Back then, Dalord didn't have such an opportunity. Or perhaps Dalord was in high spirits back then, so he didn't pay much attention to this artifact. Even if Lin Jin had read Dalord's heavenly book, he still couldn't figure it out. But no matter what, Lin Jin could now unleash the full potential of the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. This was how the massive gourd could float in the sky and pour seawater into it. The water was now gushing downwards, filling up the bottom of the basin. However, it would take some time to fill up the entire basin. Brother Lin, you're planning to create a sea out of thin air. Lord Hu exclaimed in shock when he came to his senses. Wasn't this just creating a sea out of thin air? Previously, Lin Jin had planned to summon clouds and rain, but he realized that it could only solve an urgent problem. It couldn't change Liang province's basic desolation. Hence, Lin Jin came up with the idea of creating a sea. With this inland sea, he could definitely change the geographical structure of Liang province. It was as if he had created a reservoir in this arid and desolate land. However, this reservoir was large enough. The raging waves continued to pour downwards. In less than 15 minutes, a third of the basin had been filled. The water was still raging, but after Lin Jin retracted his spell, it gradually calmed down. Lin Jin turned to see a gigantic golden-winged roc flying in his direction. Its wingspan was more than 200 feet. A behemoth, a monster cultivator. Lin Jin could tell a glance. Lord Hu glanced over as well before saying, "I know this bird." Having said that, he went up to it. Chapter 600. The golden-winged roc was a famous monster in Liangzhou. Although Taoist who rarely ventured out of Liangzhou, he still knew other monsters of the same level. Lin Jin glanced at the golden-winged roc who had landed on the ground in human form. He mused that Liangzhou was a dangerous place with humans declining. It was a good place for monsters to develop. With his sea creation ability, Liangzhou would change drastically from today onward. It wouldn't be long before the humans here would grow stronger. Lin Jin wondered if this was a good thing or a bad thing. However, when he thought about how he had reorganized Black Wind Cave and established this monster sect, he wanted to lead the monsters here onto the right path. Hence, there was no conflict between the two. Turning his head to take a look, Zhang Xian saw that the water was still raging. In less than an hour, the sea would be filled up. Taoist who had already brought the golden-winged roc over in human form. The latter was a tall man with blonde hair, blue eyes, and an aquiline nose. Upon seeing Lin Jin, he saluted with a fist salute. "Greetings, Mr. Lin." His attitude was respectful. When Taoist, who saw how polite he was a bit unhappy and said, "Brother Golden Wing, you've cultivated longer than me, and we've known each other for hundreds of years. I'm your big brother, and Brother Lin and I are sworn brothers. If you're so polite, where am I supposed to go?" It could be seen that Taoist, who was joking. However, Golden Wing said with a straight face, "Mr. Lin, with your unparalleled powers, creating a sea with your miraculous skill is a blessing to the future generations of Liangzhou. It's a great merit, and you deserve our respect. Other than that, Mr. Lin's ability to create a sea out of thin air is also admirable. It's not inappropriate for me to address you as Mr. Lin." Lin Jin nodded. Although Golden Winged was a monster, he was knowledgeable and spoke in a more appropriate manner. Clearly, he had a great background. Thus, Lin Jin asked and found out that when Taoist, who came to Liangzhou, Golden Winged had been cultivating here for centuries and had been a monster for 1,700 years. Upon hearing this, Lin Jin was dumbstruck. Using this opportunity, he saw the rank 6 monster appraised in the visitation hall and immediately understood what was going on. This was his first time seeing a monster of this level. The one he saw in the 9-heaven world didn't count. After all, that wasn't Heartland. A rank 6 monster was definitely a supernatural existence at this stage. Moreover, Golden Winged had an impressive background. He was a successful monster cultivator even before the immortal path had fallen. He had an orthodox immortal heritage, and his master was spiritual master Enigma. This was what Golden Wing said himself. Lin Jin had no idea who Sage Mystic Meow was, but he was sure that he was once an ancient immortal. Upon learning of this, Lin Jin was filled with respect. Who would have thought that such a powerful monster would be hiding in Liangzhou? Because in terms of cultivation, a rank 6 monster was equivalent to an immortal. Similar to Taoist Tiger, Golden Wing had been living in seclusion for the past few years. He only cultivated in the cave abode he had opened up. Although he had only met Taoist Tiger a few times, after an unexpected friendship, they called each other brothers. Had it been in the past, Lin Jin would have been shocked to discover a rank 6 monster. But after experiencing the 2 immortal visitors in the visitation hall last night, Lin Jin didn't think much of it. However, Golden Wing's personality was worth befriending. Lin Jin wasn't biased by race, nor did he care if the other party was a monster. So far, most of his previous enemies had been humans. Committing evil had nothing to do with whether one was a human or a demon. If a human committed evil, even a demon beast would not be able to catch up to them. As Lin Jin and Golden Wing chatted happily, Taoist, who watched from the side, and urged the 3 of them to become sworn brothers. In his words, he and Lin Jin were brothers, so Golden Wing and Lin Jin should be brothers too. Simple and direct. And so, Lin Jin addressed him as Brother Golden Wing. Golden Wing quickly returned the greeting, imitating Taoist who, and calling him Brother Lin. Sometimes, things are just so wonderful. Although it was the first time they met, they felt that they regretted not having met earlier. Moreover, their temperaments were similar, so it was not surprising that they became friends and called each other brothers. In fact, Lin Jin's feat of creating a sea was so astounding that it startled half of Liangzhou. Besides Golden Wing, various forces, reclusive experts, and cultivators from all over Liangzhou had rushed over. Lin Jin scanned the area and noticed many silhouettes in the distance. However, in terms of cultivation, none of them could compare to Golden Wing. After all, Golden Wing could already be considered an immortal, a monster. Interestingly, that terrifying rank 9 immortal devourer didn't react to rank 6 monsters at all. Instead, it killed every human immortal that appeared. Just as Lin Jin, Taoist Hu, and Golden Wing were chatting and waiting for the Sea of Liangzhou to turn into a sea, an old Taoist priest jumped down from the back of an eagle beast. A nimble monkey jumped down with him. This monkey was quite interesting. It was dressed in robes and had half a human and half a monkey. It was clearly a monkey monster, but its cultivation was shallow and it wasn't proficient in shape-shifting yet. The old Taoist excitedly stepped forward to greet him. Wu Qian of Mount Sky River's Cloud sect greets the great immortal. His attitude was extremely respectful. In fact, Lin Jin recognized the old Taoist at first glance. Wasn't this the old Taoist Wu Qian he met back in Jade Dragon City? Back then, Lin Jin even learned the 5 elemental talisman techniques from this old Taoist, including edicts, which he later developed into the powerful Vulcan Edict. It could be said that old Taoist Wu Qian had been a great help to Lin Jin. In addition, Lin Jin had to thank old Taoist Wu Qian for protecting White Ape. After that, Lin Jin tried to track down old Taoist Wu Qian several times, but to no avail. Who knew that old Taoist would end up in Liangzhou? It seemed like he hadn't changed much. If he had to point out a difference, it would be that he had gained the aura of an otherworldly expert. However, the person who met Wu Qian back in Jade Dragon City was Curator, so the old Taoist didn't recognize Lin Jin at all. He even thought Lin Jin was an immortal. If not for that, the cautious old Taoist Wu Qian would not have come out. Wu Qian had spent his entire life searching for immortality. Because of this, when he saw the giant gourd floating in the sky and the falling water turning into a sea, he was certain that this was the work of an immortal. Hence, he came out to greet the immortal. After giving it some thought, Lin Jin said, "I once heard from Master that back in Jade Dragon City, it was all thanks to Mount Sky River's Cloud Sect's Taoist Wu Qian's righteous aid that our sect's demon disciple could be protected. It's truly an honor to be able to meet Taoist Wu Qian." Having said that, he returned the gesture. Wu Qian was flabbergasted. He stared at Lin Jin for a while before asking, "May I know who your esteemed master is?" "I don't know you, little Taoist." Lin Jin smiled. "My master is Curator, and my name is Lin Jin. Also, I'm not an immortal." At that moment, Wu Qian finally understood. "So, it's Appraiser Lin." Chapter 601. After learning about this, Wu Qian was even more shocked. He had come to Liangzhou because he heard that there were immortal ruins here, so he traveled across mountains and rivers to investigate. Over the years, Wu Qian had been traveling the world as his home. He had been in Liangzhou for several months, but he couldn't find any traces of immortals. But today, when he sensed the change in the surrounding spirit energy and saw the giant gourd hovering in the sky, he was overjoyed and rushed over without a care for his own safety. Who knew it would be Appraiser Lin? The problem wasn't Appraiser Lin's cultivation level a little too high? Looking at the basin that was almost filled to the brim and the waves that were about to turn into an ocean, Wu Qian was overwhelmed with emotions and didn't know what to say. On the other hand, Lin Jin was polite to Wu Qian and introduced him to Taoist Tiger and Golden Winged. Upon learning that these two were monsters, Wu Qian shuddered in fear. Needless to say, he was terrified, but he still had to smile and greet them. He was not an idiot. The demonic aura around these two was extremely dense, and they were able to transform into human form. This meant that their cultivation level was extremely high. As for his insignificant cultivation level, in the eyes of these people, he was nothing. Therefore, he was very nervous and didn't know where to put his hands and feet. Lin Jin, on the other hand, took good care of Wu Qian. Just then, the giant basin behind them was filled with water. Lin Jin noted that this could definitely be called an inland sea. As far as the eye could see, he couldn't see the other shore. All he could see were waves. After all, this basin was so huge that it spanned more than 50 miles. To be able to turn it into an ocean like this was the work of an immortal. However, Lin Jin knew that he wasn't immortal. He was only borrowing the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. If he were to describe it as magical, then it was because this artifact was unique. Lin Jin now had a deeper understanding that this Four Seas Freedom Gourd must have had a great history. According to Taoist God's book, Taoist God had obtained this artifact by chance from a hidden location. However, he didn't put it to good use and didn't even refine it. Perhaps even Taoist God himself didn't know that this Four Seas Freedom Gourd could create an ocean out of thin air. With a wave of his hand, the large Four Seas Freedom Gourd shrank rapidly before turning into a stream of light and landing in Lin Jin's hand. Lin Jin hung the gourd by his waist. At this moment, a sword was hanging from a gourd. He looked cool and at the same time exuding a domineering aura. Suddenly, an idea popped into his mind. Then he saluted the crowd and said loudly, "Curator's disciple, Lin Jin, has been ordered by my master to divert water to create a sea for the benefit of Liangzhou. I hope you will forgive me if I have disturbed you." He paused for a moment. Lin Jin had come up with this speech on the spur of the moment. Firstly, he wanted to make a name for Curator, and secondly, he wanted to say something. Otherwise, who would know what was going on in the inland sea? Other than that, Lin Jin figured that since he was going to establish the Black Wind Monster sect, there was no better time than today. In order to establish a sect, one had to have some momentum and guests from all over. Right now, he could use the momentum of creating a sea to invite guests to witness the opening ceremony of the sect. At this, Lin Jin said, "I am the sect master of Liangzhou's Black Wind Monster sect. My Black Wind Monster sect will be establishing our sect soon. If you have the time, you may come to Black Wind Cave to witness the ceremony. I will welcome you with open arms." His voice was loud and clear. Even if it didn't reach 100 miles, it would at least reach a dozen miles. After all, Lin Jin was quite capable now. Having said that, Lin Jin invited Golden Winged and Wu Qian to Black Wind Cave. Golden Winged was about to go, but when he heard that Lin Jin was a rank 4 beast appraiser, his eyes lit up. There were several times when he wanted to say something, but it seemed like there was something he couldn't say. In the end, he held himself back and agreed to Lin Jin's invitation without hesitation. Wu Qian obviously wouldn't decline. Firstly, this was something to broaden his horizons. Secondly, he didn't dare to refuse. At once, the group returned to Black Hole Manor. Lin Jin immediately summoned the flag chiefs in charge and gave them instructions. To put it bluntly, the establishment of a sect was just a formality. At the same time, Lin Jin would use this momentum to announce it to the world. After all, Lin Jin had already made arrangements for the sect's regulations and other matters. Finally, after some discussion with Taoist Lin Jin decided that the Black Wind Monster sect's opening ceremony would be held 3 days later. The next few days would be used to prepare and entertain the guests. To Lin Jin, this was just like creating a sea in Liangzhou. It was an act of boundless virtue. Even if they didn't stand at the top, just becoming a powerful force on their side, or even a powerful chess piece, was worth it. Of course, Lin Jin had people spread the names of the Black Wind Monster sect's 2 grandmasters everywhere. From now on, whenever a Dao Lord was mentioned, people would immediately think of Curator. A Dao Lord was a fallen expert, while Curator was a living legend. Creating a sea in Liangzhou had clearly become a huge catalyst. If it weren't for this, no one would probably show up for the Black Wind Monster sect's opening ceremony. But now, they didn't have to worry about this anymore. On the first day, more than 100 guests came to Liangzhou alone. They were all experts from Liangzhou. After all, news of Black Wind Cave's annihilation of Water God cult had spread throughout Liangzhou. With Lin Jin's sea creation, Black Wind Cave instantly became the #1 force in Liangzhou. No one dared to doubt this. Even if some people weren't convinced, they didn't dare to show it. On the second and third day, guests came from afar to congratulate them. Some of them Lin Jin had heard of, some of them he had never heard of. And when these forces arrived, they would always go to see the Liangzhou's inland sea that had been created out of thin air. As the saying went, seeing once is better than hearing about it. Only when they saw the vast Liangzhou inland sea with their own eyes would they be astounded and understand the Black Wind Monster sect's prowess. Also, with Lin Jin's deliberate push, the name Curator once again resounded throughout the world. The news of the Curator subduing the demons and establishing the Black Wind Demon sect spread like wildfire. The high-grade countries and peak powers of the various provinces in Middle-earth all had their own sources of information. Recently, the words Liangzhou's Inland Sea and Black Wind Monster sect became the most frequently heard among the major forces. Needless to say, Curator was involved in these 2 incidents as well. There were even various rumors claiming that Curator was the one who created the sea in Liangzhou out of thin air. More people believed this theory. After all, Lin Jin's title paled in comparison to curator. Those in the know knew that Lin Jin was curator's disciple and an official rank 4 beast appraiser. But those who didn't know had no idea who Lin Jin was. 3 days later, before the Black Wind Monster Sect's official opening ceremony, Lin Jin told Taoist who that he wanted to invite his master, curator, over to preside over the ceremony. Taoist who was naturally in favor of this. After all, curator was Black Wind Monster Sect's grandmaster, and Taoist who was eager to meet this legendary figure. Chapter 602. However, Lin Jin would have to suffer. After all, if he were to disguise himself as curator, it would be inconvenient for Lin Jin as the cave master to appear. This might not have been possible in the past, but now that Lin Jin's cultivation had improved and he had refined the 4 C's gourd, the spells he could cast were incomparable to before. For example, camouflage. Lin Jin had always had a soft spot for camouflage. Although it wasn't particularly profound and didn't have any offensive or defensive capabilities, it could at most deceive and confuse others. However, Lin Jin was extremely serious about cultivating this camouflage. He wasn't going to boast, but when it came to camouflage cultivation, Lin Jin was definitely one of the best. Since ancient times, mirages, moon in the water, and flowers in the mirror were all related to water. In Daelord's heavenly book, there were also tips to using similar spells. Lin Jin's comprehension wasn't bad. After linking the mysteries of several aspects together, he was able to make a huge improvement in his camouflage. Although it seemed ordinary, it was in fact a huge improvement. Inside Black Wind Cave, in Lin Jin's private cave abode, he changed into his curator outfit. His clothes, shoes, hat, and mask were meticulous from head to toe, accentuating the curator's demeanor and aura. From his appearance, no one could tell that this was Lin Jin. This time, Lin Jin was going to appear in public as curator. But at the same time, Lin Jin as the cave master had to be present. Hence, with a wave of his hand, a cloud of water vapor floated out of the 4 C's gourd. The vapor condensed and gradually formed a human figure. Upon closer inspection, this human figure bore a striking resemblance to Lin Jin. Then, something miraculous happened. With a flash of light, the human figure formed by the vapor turned into Lin Jin's appearance. At first, it was only 80 to 90% similar. This was because it was Lin Jin's first time using this camouflage, and he wasn't used to it yet. But soon, after some adjustments, this fake Lin Jin became more and more lifelike. In the end, even those who were most familiar with Lin Jin wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It's a pity that this is just an illusion. Although Lin Jin was overjoyed, he knew his limits. This was at most an emergency. Since this camouflage couldn't be used to speak, it could only fool others. However, being able to do this was already pretty good. Lin Jin straightened his clothes, hung the gourd by his waist, and strode out of the cave. Behind him, the fake Lin Jin followed respectfully. Bystanders would definitely not be able to see through it. Inside Black Wind Cave, there was an empty space the size of plaza. This place would be used as the venue for the ceremony. By the time Lin Jin arrived, the place was already packed with people. Many of them were demon cultivators from the Black Wind Cave. All of them were grotesque and ferocious, but the interesting thing was that all of them were very well behaved. Moreover, when they spoke, they were very polite. This was the rule Lin Jin had set. As a monster, he had to be respectful and courteous. This way, even if he was a monster cultivator, he could earn the respect of others. There were also many guests who came to congratulate him. Among them, there were hundreds of various demon cultivators. Truth be told, it was rare to even see a monster on a normal day. Just like in the Jade Dragon Kingdom, monsters were extremely rare. In fact, as long as the land was populated by humans, monsters were rare. On the other hand, places like Liangzhou and deep in the mountains and forests where humans were rarely seen were places where monsters could thrive. After all, the two races were different. There was a natural estrangement between them, and they were enemies. Just like today, it was rare for human experts to gather together with monsters. For many people, this was their first time encountering something like this. Lin Jin scanned his surroundings through his mask. Whether it was the demon beasts or humans, they all stood up and saluted the moment they saw the curator. Even though it was the first time most of them had seen the legendary curator, they still did not dare to be rude. It couldn't be helped. Recently, the curator's reputation had been too great. Some even said that the curator and the Tao Lord shared the same lineage and were probably experts of the same level. Otherwise, why would one of the two grandmasters of Black Wind sect be the curator, while the other was an expert Tao Lord from 500 years ago? They wouldn't believe there was no connection between the two. Lin Jin could guess what they were thinking. He borrowed the Tao Lord's title just to make a name for himself. But Lin Jin believed that it wouldn't be long before the title of curator surpassed that of the Tao Lord and became a living legend. Surprisingly, there were a few eminent monks among the guests. It was obvious that they were from Daluo Temple. Lin Jin immediately went over to greet them. Lin Jin had seen many of these eminent monks before. They were the rectors of Daluo Temple's various halls. Their statuses were high and their cultivations were impressive. Daluo Temple was quite a distance away from Liangzhou. For them to come all the way here to congratulate Lin Jin was a great show of respect. Lin Jin returned the favor by giving them the highest level of courtesy. See that? That's Daluo Temple's rector. This old monk is amazing. He's famous for subduing monsters and demons. But to think that he would come all the way to Liangzhou to congratulate a monster sect. It's like the sun has risen from the west. There's nothing strange about that. It's not like you don't know how Curator barged into Daluo Temple all by himself. I heard that Curator and Daluo Temple were on good terms after that fight. Something like that happened. A few gossipy fellows discussed in hushed tones. Besides Daluo Temple, Phoenix Palace's commander, Zhao Jingyan, was also here. Lin Jin didn't go out of his way to inform her, but to think she would make it here as well. She must have been keeping an eye on the news and made a move as soon as she heard the news. Otherwise, she couldn't have arrived so quickly. Since Lin Jin was familiar with Zhao Jingyan, he went over to talk to her. Both Daluo Temple and Phoenix Palace were forces on par with premium countries. Both of them sent people to congratulate Curator with gifts. There were also quite a few envoys from other middle-ranked and high-ranked kingdoms who had come. Jade Dragon Kingdom was the first to arrive. Now, it was rumored that Curator was from Jade Dragon Kingdom. Curator didn't deny it either. Hence, with this momentum, Jade Dragon Kingdom's reputation grew. Hence, how could Jade Dragon Kingdom not come when Curator established the Black Wind Monster sect? Not only did they come, but they came in large numbers. Even Heavenly Spiral Kingdom sent someone over. And the person who came was none other than the third prince, Feng Ziqian. Just from this alone, one could tell how experienced Feng Junwo was. As expected of an emperor of a premium country, he was extremely thoughtful. Feng Ziqian was the closest to Curator, and he was almost the next emperor of Heavenly Spiral Kingdom. Sending Feng Ziqian here wasn't considered rude or neglectful. Besides these people, there were also many villainous experts and reclusive rogue cultivators. Some were famous, while others were unknown. But it was undeniable that none of the guests here were easy to deal with. They were all experts with trump cards up their sleeves. Chapter 603. There were quite a few familiar faces among the guests. Just then, a woman got up and bowed. "Greetings, Curator, Mr. Lin. I'm Hu Yuzhen of Mount Desolate." This woman was incredibly beautiful and had a seductive charm to her. However, she was currently respectful and proper. Hu Yuzhen. When Lin Jin saw her, he recognized Hu Yuzhen. She was the demon he met on his way back from Jade Dragon City. Back then, Hu Yuzhen was a rank 5 cultivator with incredible strength. She had also entered the unending landscape with Lin Jin. After that, Lin Jin had comprehended spells on Mount Gua. At the same time, he had used the demon-slaying sword to destroy the obsession in Hu Yuzhen's body. To a certain extent, Lin Jin had saved her life. After all, it wasn't uncommon for one's obsession to turn into a demon and ruin one's future. However, it had been a long time since they parted ways on Mount Gua. To think Hu Yuzhen would come over to congratulate him. This was a good thing. However, it was Lin Jin who knew Hu Yuzhen back then, not the curator. Hence, Lin Jin used a spell to create a fake Lin Jin who nodded at Hu Yuzhen as a form of greeting. I've heard Lin Jin mention you before, the curator said, focusing his attention back on himself. It couldn't be helped. A fake was a fake. Lin Jin could create an empty shell now, but he couldn't make this fake Lin Jin speak yet. Hu Yuzhen thought it was because the curator was here and Mr. Lin didn't dare to say anything, so she didn't think too much about it. I see that you're lacking blood. Are you injured? Lin Jin's beast appraising skills had improved so much that even without touching her, he could tell that something was wrong. It was obvious that Hu Yuzhen looked normal, but in reality, she was slightly lacking in vitality. The latter was stunned before quickly nodding. Curator's cultivation is incredible. You're right. Yuzhen was indeed injured some time ago. Lin Jin nodded. If his guess was right, Hu Yuzhen must have run into some trouble and came here with the excuse of congratulating him. She might be here to seek help, or she might be here to seek refuge. But no matter what, Lin Jin didn't mind. He didn't think anyone would dare to come to Black Wind Monster Sect and cause trouble at a time like this. Even if it was someone as powerful as the corpse cultivator, Lin Jin was sure he wouldn't be able to leave this place alive. With strength, one had to be confident. Let's rest in the Black Wind Cave for now. In other words, Lin Jin was telling Hu Yuzhen that she didn't have to worry about anything else now that she was here. Hu Yuzhen's face was filled with joy, but she seemed to have other matters to attend to. At this moment, she hesitated for a moment, then directly kowtowed and said, Hu Yuzhen has always been cultivating alone. Today, I wish to join the Black Wind Demon Sect. I hope that you will accept me. After saying that, he kowtowed once. Lin Jin hadn't expected this. However, the reason why he founded the Black Wind Demon Sect was to recruit all the demon cultivators in the world and lead them into the righteous path. Therefore, it was a good thing that Hu Yuzhen was willing to join the Black Wind Demon Sect. There was no reason to refuse. However, Lin Jin couldn't agree to this request right away. He had to carefully understand Hu Yuzhen's recent actions. If she committed all sorts of evil outside and came to seek refuge at Black Wind Monster Sect, Lin Jin wouldn't agree to it. Seeing that the curator didn't say anything, Hu Yuzhen was a little anxious, but she didn't get up. Similarly anxious was Daoist Hu. From the moment Hu Yuzhen appeared, Daoist Tiger's eyes never left this tigress. After cultivating for hundreds of years, Daoist Hu was just an ignorant little tiger cub. Later on, Daoist Lord rescued him and imparted him cultivation methods, allowing him to cultivate into a demon. Cultivation, metamorphosis, and training, Daoist Hu had experienced a lot. Then he got injured and struggled for hundreds of years. But there was one thing missing. In the past, it was rare to encounter a charismatic demon cultivator. Even if there were, they were either juniors or aliens. In any case, he had never encountered Tigress. But today, the sun rose from the west, allowing Daoist Hu to meet a Tigress. Moreover, this Tigress metamorphosis skill was even better than his own. Just that bewitching shade of purple was enough to stun Daoist Hu. Upon hearing that Hu Yuzhen wanted to join the Black Wind Demon Sect, Daoist Hu was so happy he almost fainted. He wanted Hu Yuzhen to join them more than anyone else. Only then would they have a chance to interact further. However, the curator didn't say a word. This was driving Daoist Hu crazy. He wanted nothing more than to agree on the curator's behalf. Fortunately, Daoist Hu knew the gravity of the situation. If it were Lin Jin, he would probably agree on the curator's behalf. After all, they were brothers, so this wasn't a big deal. But not the curator. Truth be told, when he saw the curator, Daoist Hu felt a tinge of fear. Moreover, Lin Jin was so strong that this curator could only be even stronger. His first impression and fear made Daoist Hu afraid to be rude to the curator. Hence, even if he was as anxious as a cat, he didn't dare to make a sound. However, Lin Jin noticed how anxious he was. Lin Jin was puzzled. What was wrong with Daoist Hu? Why did he look constipated? What happened? When Lin Jin noticed Daoist Hu's passionate eyes occasionally glancing at Hu Yuzhen, who was kneeling on the ground, Lin Jin was stunned. Then realization dawned on him. Is Taoist Hu in heat? Lin Jin calculated the season and shook his head inwardly. Come to think of it, if Hu Yuzhen wanted to join the Black Wind Demon sect, especially under such circumstances, Lin Jin couldn't possibly refuse. As long as Hu Yuzhen wasn't a bloodthirsty person, it wouldn't be a problem. Lin Jin's contemplation earlier was just a facade. When Lin Jin asked Hu Yuzhen about it, the latter immediately assured him that she hadn't killed any innocent people or committed any evil deeds. And so, Lin Jin nodded and accepted Hu Yuzhen. In terms of cultivation alone, Hu Yuzhen could absolutely be considered as one of the best amongst the demonic cultivators. Just in terms of the art of transformation alone, she had already surpassed most of the demonic cultivators in the Black Wind demonic sect. Her cultivation method was definitely unique. Having such an expert join the Black Wind demon sect was obviously a good thing. As for Hu Yuzhen's injury, while it might seem troublesome to others, it was nothing to Lin Jin. He was confident that he could handle it. Accepting Hu Yuzhen into the Black Wind demon sect was a big deal, and since she was going to join the sect, she had to follow the rules to acknowledge a master. Who was Hu Yuzhen's master? Taoist who was eager to try, but Hu Yuzhen didn't even spare him a glance. When Lin Jin asked her, she gave it some thought and said, "Curator, I've received Mr. Lin's guidance, so I'm willing to acknowledge him as my master." The Mr. Lin she was referring to was obviously Lin Jin. This surprised Lin Jin, but that was fine too. Casting a spell, the fake Lin Jin came over and nodded at Hu Yuzhen. The real Lin Jin said, "We'll hold the ceremony another day. Hu Yuzhen, I can see that you're lacking blood flow. You must be injured. Let me take a look." Hu Yuzhen wasn't surprised at all. After all, this was the legendary curator. It was rumored that even the advanced beast appraisers in the sacred land of beast appraisers, Heavenly Jade Academy, treated curator with the utmost respect. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that curator was a living legend to be able to groom someone like appraiser Lin. Chapter 604. Curator's status in the beast appraiser community was just like his fame. Word had spread like wildfire. Those who knew Curator understood this. Those who didn't know him came here with the intention to broaden their horizons. Some even came here because they were in trouble and needed Curator's help. Seeing that Curator was going to treat the tiger demon, Hu Yuzhen, many turned to look at him. Even their breaths grew more cautious. Among them was the golden-winged demon. He was probably the only immortal-level monster here. Moreover, he was Lin Jin's sworn brother with Taoist Hu and Taoist Hu. His status was extraordinary. Every single one of the demonic beasts in the Liang province had heard of the name of the golden-winged demon. However, very few of them had seen him in person. At this moment, the golden-winged demon had taken on his human form. Even though most of them did not recognize him, there were still a few who did. It's the golden-winged demon. Wow, even he's here. He's not just here. Didn't you see how the golden-winged demon bowed to Curator as a junior? Curator must really be a contemporary immortal. I think so too. Great minds think alike. The two powerful demon cultivators looked at each other, their faces filled with appreciation for each other. Then, the two monsters turned their attention to Curator. A silver light flashed in Curator's hand. Lin Jin didn't know what he was doing, but he remained silent as if he was plotting something. Indeed, Lin Jin was plotting something. He had probed Hu Yuzhen's acupoints with his needles to check on her injuries. But upon closer inspection, the results made Lin Jin frown. The situation was more troublesome than he thought. There was a blood talisman in Hu Yuzhen's body. An expert had clearly planted this blood talisman in her body, and to a certain extent, it could even affect her mind. Also, as knowledgeable as he was, Lin Jin could tell where this blood talisman came from. If he was right, it was that guy's doing. At this, Lin Jin invoked a spell. The needles in Hu Yuzhen's body were activated immediately. Hu Yuzhen's head tilted, and she fell to the side. With quick reflexes, Taoist Hu rushed over and caught her in his arms. "Help her get some rest. Her internal injuries are unique, so I'll treat her later," Lin Jin ordered. Taoist Hu nodded quickly. Truth be told, Taoist who was more than happy to hear that. Originally, he had some thoughts about Hu Yuzhen. Now that the opportunity to get close to her had come, how could Taoist who let it go? By the time Taoist Hu Yuzhen had settled down to rest, there were even more Yao cultivators asking Curator to treat them. Many of the demon cultivators had come out of admiration. Although Hu Yuzhen's situation was a little special, it was not enough to arouse any suspicions about the famous curator. After all, a person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. When they saw the curator heal the first old demon cultivator who came forward to seek treatment with a wave of his hand, the demon cultivators who had been watching from the sidelines all rushed forward. It was a bustling scene. Those who didn't know better might have thought that this was some beast appraiser's clinic. It looked like a large-scale clinic. Of course, Lin Jin wasn't the type to help with everything. He explained that he would only help with ailments and injuries. As for evolution methods and whatnot, there was nothing he could do even if he wanted to. Even so, more than 10 demon cultivators asked for help. Lin Jin investigated them one by one and quickly treated them. It didn't take long for all of them to be healed. Some of these demon cultivators were suffering from old ailments. Some had problems in their cultivation that damaged their foundations, and some had fresh injuries from recent battles. To Lin Jin, these weren't worth mentioning at all. He could solve them easily, especially when he used the spirit refinement needle art to repair the meridians of a demon cultivator whose meridians had been damaged, allowing the paralyzed demon cultivator to stand up again. In that instant, all the demon cultivators present knew that the curator truly lived up to his name. In addition, although the Black Wind Demon sect was newly established, with a curator at its helm, it would be invincible. If anyone dared to harm the Black Wind Demon sect, all the demon cultivators in the world would probably not agree to it. The Golden Winged Demon could no longer sit still. Seeing how extraordinary the curator was, he steeled his heart and stepped forward to bow to the curator. Upon seeing the Golden Winged Demon stand up and bow, the other demon cultivators tactfully stepped aside, not daring to disturb him. Stunned, Lin Jin asked at once, "What is the Golden Winged Demon doing?" Before asking, Lin Jin had secretly investigated the Golden Winged Demon's condition. The demon's aura was strong, his cultivation was stable, and he had no illnesses or disasters. To put it bluntly, he was in great health. With this, he shouldn't be begging Lin Jin for help. Just as Lin Jin was puzzled, the Golden Winged Demon answered his question. So it was the Golden Winged Demon's son. As a demon who had cultivated for thousands of years, the Golden Winged Demon had a son 200 years ago. Naturally, he was a precious son and nurtured meticulously, eager to pass on all his skills to his son. However, the sky was unpredictable. Several years ago, the Golden Winged Demon's son, who was to be called Little Golden Wing for now, secretly went on an adventure. In the end, he was severely injured and fled back, fainting before he could say a word. Over the next few years, the Golden Winged Demon tried everything he could think of to prolong his only son's life. He used countless treasures and almost every method he could think of. However, the most he could do was to keep his son alive. It was difficult for Little Golden Wing to even wake up, let alone hand over his enemy, so that the Golden Winged Demon could avenge him. This matter also became the thing that the Golden Winged Great Demon was most concerned about. He had long heard of the curator's name and had sent his subordinates to investigate, but to no avail. Now that he learned that the curator was one of Black Wind Sect's grandmasters, he came here. His willingness to befriend Lin Jin was also to use Lin Jin's influence to get to know the curator. The curator might be his son's last hope. The Golden Winged Demon was cautious too. He didn't speak at first and only observed in secret. After witnessing the curator's supernatural powers with his own eyes, he couldn't hold back anymore and asked for help. So that's how it is. I beg of you, curator, to show mercy and save my poor son. The Golden Winged Rock was almost bowing to the ground. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that if the curator could save his son, forget bowing to him. Even if he had a kowtow, the Golden Winged Demon would do it. As a great demon, he had the pride and dignity of a great demon. Under normal circumstances, even an immortal wouldn't be able to make him lower his noble head. However, for his only son, the golden-winged demon was willing to do anything. Just like now, he was begging for help in a humble manner. Fortunately, Lin Jin wasn't an arrogant person and he didn't like prodigal sons. Since he had become sworn brothers with the golden-winged demon, he wouldn't decline a request like this. At once, Lin Jin said, "There's no need for formalities, golden-winged demon. Putting aside the fact that you've become sworn brothers with my disciple, even if you hadn't, I would do my best to heal you if you came to me." Chapter 605. The golden-winged demon was overjoyed at this. "I'll bring my son over right now." The golden-winged demon couldn't wait any longer, but Lin Jin stopped him. "Based on what you said, there's no rush. Moreover, young Master Goldenwing's injuries haven't healed, so it's not appropriate for him to be moved. Why don't we wait for a while? Once the ceremony is over, I'll personally treat him." Needless to say, the golden-winged demon quickly nodded. Although he was burning with anxiety, he knew that it had been years, so there was no rush. Seeing how calm the curator was, there might really be hope this time. At the thought of this, the golden-winged demon found it hard to stay calm. The upcoming Black Wind Monster Sect's inauguration ceremony was like a torment to him. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. No one came looking for trouble. After all, who would dare to do so at this critical juncture? Forget the many experts in Black Wind Monster Sect. Just the golden-winged demon alone wouldn't agree to it. If anyone dared to stop him, he might just jump up and kill them. Fortunately, this was a monster sect, so there weren't too many unnecessary formalities. The ceremony was relatively simple too. The banquet that followed became the highlight of the event, and it was lively. Lin Jin knew that the golden-winged demon was anxious, so he merely toasted and drank with him at the banquet. Then, he had the demon lead the way. He wanted to check on young Master Goldenwing's condition. The golden-winged demon was obviously happy. Taoist who wanted to follow, but Lin Jin stopped him. It was simple. Black Wind Monster Sect was established today, and someone had to watch over it. If Taoist who were to leave, who would greet the guests? Of course, to prevent the fake Lin Jin from being exposed, Lin Jin brought him along as well. It was much safer this way. "Curator and Brother Lin, please sit on my back." Once outside, the golden-winged demon immediately reverted to his original form. He had transformed into a gigantic golden condor. The size of his body was simply breathtaking. Fortunately, Lin Jin had seen the world. Leaping onto the condor's back, the golden-winged demon immediately flapped his wings. In an instant, they were far away from Black Wind Monster Sect. Lin Jin could see that with each flap of his wings, the golden-winged demon could travel 1,000 miles. At most, he could flap his wings 3 times before landing on a giant cliff. Amazing! This was Lin Jin's first time seeing a monster that could fly so fast. It could be said that this was the fastest flying monster he had ever seen. There was no other. This golden-winged great demon that had reached the 6th stage indeed had some skill. This cliff was the cave abode of the golden-winged demon. There was a huge cave entrance on the cliff, and there were many eagles flying around it. When they saw the golden-winged demon, they all came forward to bow. The golden-winged demon invited Curator and Lin Jin into the cave abode. Then, a beautiful woman with a demonic aura welcomed them. "Come, madam, come and greet Curator. This is my sworn brother, Brother Lin Jin," the golden-winged monster immediately said when he saw the woman. Needless to say, this woman was Madame Golden-Winged. At a glance, Lin Jin could tell that Madame Golden-Winged wasn't weak either. She was a rank 5 monster, only slightly weaker than the golden-winged demon. There were indeed many demonic cultivators in the Liang province. Not only was there the Black Wind Cave, but there was also the Golden Wing Cliff. Amazing! Madame Golden-Winged was clearly well-mannered as she immediately went forward to bow. When she heard that Curator was here to treat her only son, Madame Golden-Winged knelt on the ground in excitement. "Curator, if you can save my son, I'm willing to do anything to repay your kindness." Madame Golden-Winged was filled with sincerity. With this gesture, the Golden-Winged demon actually knelt to the side as well. Lin Jin quickly helped him up, but the Golden-Winged demon said, "Curator, you don't have to think too much. Brother Lin and I are brothers, so you could be considered half a master to me. It's only right for a disciple to pay his respects to his master." Lin Jin chuckled inwardly, but didn't say much. After all, parents were always concerned about their children. Soon, Lin Jin saw young Master Golden-Winged. It was a dying golden-winged bird. Clearly, due to his severe injuries, he couldn't even maintain his human form. Young Master Golden-Winged wasn't small in size, but most of his feathers had fallen off. He looked like he was on the brink of death. Lin Jin frowned at just one glance. He had encountered a tough nut to crack. This didn't look good. Lin Jin hurried over and reached out to touch the bird, letting the Museum of Deadly Beasts appraise it first. Upon seeing the results, Lin Jin's expression darkened even further. Fortunately, he was wearing a mask. Otherwise, the Golden-Winged demon and his wife might have fainted if they saw this. Strictly speaking, young Master Golden-Winged wasn't the only one who was physically injured. His soul was the one that suffered the most damage. Someone had shattered young Master Golden-Winged's soul. If the Golden-Winged demon hadn't been so powerful as to forcefully seal young Master Golden-Winged's soul with his demonic energy, he wouldn't have been able to hold on for the past few years. Even so, this wasn't a long-term solution. If things went on like this, young Master Golden-Winged would die within a year at most. This is a little tricky, Lin Jin thought. However, it was only a little tricky. The Museum of Deadly Beasts provided several treatment plans. As long as there were treatment plans, there was hope. The only difference was how difficult it was. After a moment of contemplation, Lin Jin came up with a plan. He chose a plan that currently had the highest chance of success, and that was to use the body casting needle to mend young Master Golden-Winged's soul. Fortunately, Lin Jin had the body casting needle. Otherwise, without it, he would have to find some unique treasures to mend young Master Golden-Winged's soul. For example, the soul nurturing grass. Most people had never even heard of this item, let alone looking for it. It could be said that Lin Jin had saved a lot of effort with the body casting needle. At this, Lin Jin said to the Golden-Winged demon, "Good move, Golden-Winged demon. Even you wouldn't be able to last more than a few years if you only condense your soul with demonic energy. You must be at your limit now, right?" The latter was stunned at first before realization dawned on him. The curator has sharp eyes. He even noticed this. But he was even happier. The reason was simple. If the curator could figure this out, he might really have a way to save young Master Golden-Winged. With this, the Golden-Winged demon grew even more excited. "But there's one thing you have to promise me. When I make my move later, you have to retract your demonic energy. Otherwise, your son's injuries will be difficult to treat." Lin Jin wasn't bluffing. Currently, young Master Golden-Winged's broken soul was being forcefully condensed by the Golden-Winged demon's demonic energy. Although it could be kept intact, the soul fragments were a mess. There was no way to mend it. Only by withdrawing his demonic energy could Lin Jin move the needle. This depended on whether the Golden-Winged demon was willing to trust him. Because everyone knew that if he withdrew his request now and the treatment failed, young Master Golden-Winged would not even have the chance to linger on. The Golden-Winged demon clearly understood this as well. Sure enough, he hesitated. Although he believed in the curator's ability, there was always a what if. If he failed, his son would surely die. Chapter 606. While the Golden-Winged demon was still hesitating, Madame Golden-Winged's gaze turned sharp as she said, "Curator, you just have to do it. My husband will obey your orders and remove the demonic energy. Whether it succeeds or not, my husband and I will always remember Curator's kindness." She actually made the first decision. At this, the Golden-Winged demon came to a realization. At this crucial moment, his wife was the one who could see things more clearly. Previously, the demonic energy had forcefully gathered his soul, and he was only barely holding on. Based on the current situation, he might not even last a year. When that time came, there would be no chance at all. But now, with Curator here and the fact that he had a way to save his son, what was there to hesitate about? Even if there was only a 10% chance of success, it was better than waiting for death. The only difference was that he would be able to survive for another year. But now that his son was in this state, living might just be torture. It was better for him to be free as soon as possible. As these thoughts flashed through the golden-winged demon's mind, he came back to his senses and quickly bowed to Curator. Madam is right. I will remove the demonic energy now. No matter what the outcome is, Golden Wing is willing to accept it. It was obvious that this couple had been through a psychological struggle. By making this choice, they were willing to accept the loss of their only son. While that was true, Lin Jean felt that he should give this couple some reassurance. After all, Lin Jean was 99% confident in the success rate of this operation, maybe even higher. Hence, he said, "This time, I will use acupuncture techniques to mend your son's soul. I'm more than 90% confident. Please wait outside the cave." At this, the golden-winged couple was overjoyed. More than 90% confident? This was practically a done deal. The golden-winged demon dared not delay any further. Pulling his wife along, they bowed to Curator and the fake Lin Jean before leaving the cave. Outside, the golden-winged demon looked expectant while his wife still looked worried. Despite her previous decisiveness, when it came to times like this, no one could compare to her concern for her son. Husband, does Curator really have such supernatural powers? Clearly, Lady Golden Wing still had some doubts, even though he had not revealed any of them previously. Madam, don't worry about that. If it were anyone else, I would be the first to doubt them. After all these years, we've met many people who are angling for fame. But this time it's different. The Curator is no ordinary person. His disciple, who is also my new sworn brother, can create a sea. If his disciple is like that, there's no need to mention his master. If there are no accidents, this Curator is a contemporary immortal. Immortal? Even if I become an immortal, it doesn't matter. Husband, didn't you say that with your cultivation, you can also become a demon immortal? The madam was still doubtful. The golden-winged demon hurriedly waved his hand. That doesn't count. It's just that my realm has increased, but my abilities are still lacking. Furthermore, how can a demon immortal compare to a human immortal? When the heavenly Tao suddenly changed, it was human immortals who were destroyed. Why? It's because human immortals are stronger, and I've seen Curator's abilities with my own eyes. There's no problem. At the golden-winged demon's words, the madam was relieved. Of course, that was only on the surface. In reality, the husband and wife were still guarding the cave entrance, pacing back and forth from time to time. After all, even if the golden-winged demon believed in Curator's abilities, it was better to be safe than sorry. Inside the cave, Lin Jean had already begun his acupuncture treatment. His spirit-casting needle could be said to be the highest level of acupuncture techniques. The power of his supernatural powers was definitely comparable to an immortal's skills. To a certain extent, even immortals didn't have this kind of soul repair technique. Lin Jin's acupuncture skills were now at the pinnacle of perfection. If there was one thing he was most afraid of during the soul repair process, it would be being disturbed by others. However, Lin Jean wasn't worried about this at all. With a rank 6 and rank 5 monster guarding outside, he didn't have to worry about anyone barging in and disturbing him. Hence, everything went smoothly. Fortunately, this golden-winged gentleman was still considered young among the monsters, and his soul wasn't strong to begin with. Hence, the repair process was relatively easy. Lin Jean was currently focused on using the spirit-refining needle to piece together the golden-winged gentleman's soul bit by bit. All he could see were golden rays that shone like stars in the sky. Normal people wouldn't be able to do anything if they saw this. Only Lin Jean was able to use his silver needles to pull back the shattered soul bit by bit and sew it back together. For hours passed by in a flash. Lin Jean was completely focused. When the last piece of the soul was sewn back together, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. The most difficult part about this task was how complicated it was. After all, to repair a shattered soul, one had to be extremely careful. After all, the soul was formless, and the difficulty was like using a needle and thread to mend a pile of rotten tofu. Any slight distraction, and all of his previous efforts would go to waste. Fortunately, Lin Jin succeeded. Currently, the golden-winged gentleman was fine. Based on his current condition, he just needed to rest for a day or two. Once his soul was completely stabilized, he would wake up. However, Lin Jin was curious. How did this golden-winged gentleman end up in this state? It wasn't difficult to destroy the physical body, but to attack the soul directly was a different story. Most people didn't have such skills. He called in the golden-winged couple who had been waiting anxiously outside the cave. Lin Jin told them the results. When Lady Golden-Winged heard this, she cried tears of joy. She was so excited that she knelt down and thanked Lin Jin. The golden-winged monster was also overwhelmed with emotion. He couldn't hide the ecstasy on his face. He also knelt down and kowtowed to express his gratitude. Lin Jin happened to ask about the condition of the golden-winged gentleman's injuries. At the mention of this, the golden-winged couple's expressions turned ferocious. To tell you the truth, we don't know who hurt our son either. If we did, we would have turned that person's bones into ashes. The golden-winged monster's voice was laced with hatred. His wife said, "It's all thanks to Curator's divine spell that my poor son was saved. When my son wakes up, we'll ask him and we'll know." That was true. Back then, when the golden-winged gentleman was heavily injured, he tried his best to escape. In the end, he fainted before he could say anything. Hence, he had no idea who his enemy was. If he did, based on the golden-winged gentleman's personality, he wouldn't let the matter rest. That's fine. I'm curious about this as well. After all, an expert who can directly injure a person's soul is no ordinary person. When your son wakes up, we'll look for my disciple and explain the situation to him, Lin Jin said. Now that the matter here was settled, Black Wind Monster Sect was still waiting for him to return. The golden-winged couple obviously didn't dare to stop him. This time, the golden-winged monster carried the curator and fake Lin Jin on his back and returned to Black Wind Monster Sect in a matter of seconds. Admittedly, the golden-winged monster's flying speed was too fast. If he had a mount like this, he could probably go anywhere in this vast world. Chapter 607. By the time Lin Jin returned to Black Wind Sect, the banquet was coming to an end. As the sect's grandmaster, curator had to be present. After drinking a few cups of wine, the golden-winged monster bade farewell to his only son and ran back to Golden Wing Cliff. Before he left, the golden-winged monster said that when his son woke up, the first thing he would do was to thank curator and repay him for saving his life. Lin Jin nodded. Making use of this matter to get on good terms with a rank 6 demon cultivator would definitely be a profitable business. After the banquet ended and the guests left, Lin Jin went to check on Hu Yuzhen. Due to the spirit refinement needle, Hu Yuzhen was still unconscious. Beside her, Taoist, who was concerned. Beneath his mask, Lin Jin wore a solemn expression. Using the spirit refinement needle to make Hu Yuzhen fall asleep was actually to protect her. Other than that, it was also to seal that strange blood talisman in her body. Now that everything else was settled, it was time to deal with this blood talisman. Lin Jin already knew where this blood talisman came from. In the past, he might have been at a loss and even had a hard time dealing with it. But that was then, and this was now. He had many more tricks up his sleeves, so dealing with this blood talisman was much easier. Taoist, who? Please guard the cave entrance. Don't let anyone in. Lin Jin was issuing orders in the name of curator, so Taoist, who dared not disobey. After Taoist, who stood guard at the cave entrance, only curator and the fake Lin Jin were left in the cave. Invoking a spell, Lin Jin used the spirit refinement needle to slowly force the blood talisman out of Hu Yuzhen's body bit by bit. A blood talisman was pierced by several spirit refinement needles and was forcefully pulled out of Hu Yuzhen's body. The blood energy on the blood talisman pulsated as it tried to force the surrounding spirit refinement needles back, but failed every time. It was clear that Lin Jin had the upper hand in this matter. Who are you? Show yourself. Lin Jin changed his spell, and the spirit refinement needle with the blood talisman changed accordingly. It was as if the tightly shut door had been opened halfway. In an instant, a bloody light emerged from the blood talisman. It was like a mass of blood floating in the air, rolling and flowing. It was incomparably strange. If a timid person saw this mass of blood mist twisting and deforming, they would probably piss their pants. A moment later, the blood mist condensed into a giant human face. This human face was ferocious and terrifying. There seemed to be two beams of ghostly light flickering in its eyes. It was clear that a divine soul that wasn't weak was currently looking over through the blood eye. Staring at the bloody face, Lin Jin felt like he had seen it before. Then, he remembered. It really is him. Lin Jin mumbled to himself. It was Patriarch Bloodcloak. When he saw the blood amulet in Hu Yuzhen's body, Lin Jin already had this speculation. Now that he saw the bloody face, he was even more certain of it. In other words, Hu Yuzhen was not actually injured. She was just being controlled by the blood talisman. Now that the blood talisman had been forced out by Lin Jin's spirit-casting needle, Hu Yuzhen was safe. Moreover, Lin Jin had completely suppressed the blood talisman's power, so he wasn't afraid of her stirring up any trouble. In the next moment, a burst of laughter came from the giant face. "Are you the curator?" It was Patriarch Shui Pao's voice. Lin Jin had met him before at Jade Dragon City, and because of Yang Qingshi's incident, they had a grudge against each other. Hence, Lin Jin recognized this voice immediately. "Patriarch Shui Pao." Lin Jin called out coldly. Hee. A strange cackle ensued. "Not bad. So you know my name? You must have heard it from your precious disciple." Patriarch Shui Pao glared at the fake Lin Jin with a menacing gaze. However, Patriarch Shui Pao's threat was destined to be fruitless. Because this was a fake Lin Jin, a mere smokescreen. Forget threatening. Even if someone held a knife to his neck, the fake Lin Jin wouldn't bat an eyelid. "It's just a thought. Do you think I won't destroy you right now?" Lin Jin couldn't stand Patriarch Shui Pao's arrogance, so he threatened him coldly. Patriarch Shui Pao's expression darkened. He couldn't possibly remain indifferent to the curator's threat. Based on the current situation, this curator was indeed powerful. The thought Patriarch Shui Pao had left in the blood talisman was no match for him. "Why do you have to do this? I have no grudge against you, curator. I do have a grudge against your disciple, but since ancient times, it's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. I, Patriarch Shui, am a magnanimous man. I won't lower myself to the level of a junior." He was clearly trying to make peace. He had no other choice. Now that Patriarch Shui Pao's thought talisman had been subdued by Lin Jin, it couldn't do anything. If he didn't make peace now, he would surely be killed. He wouldn't gain anything from this. This wasn't in Patriarch Shui Pao's best interest, so he decided to make peace and even seek cooperation. After all, he knew a lot about the curator. Just like everyone else, Patriarch Shui Pao treated the curator as an immortal expert. Lin Jin naturally noticed something as well. He coldly laughed. "Ancestor Shui Pao, you schemed and schemed to inject the blood talisman into Hu Yuzhen's body, making use of her to come to my Black Wind Demon sect. Why exactly did you do that? Tell me, if I don't like it, I'm sorry, but you can forget about keeping this strand of will of yours." Now that Lin Jin had the upper hand, he wasn't going to hold back. Moreover, to Lin Jin, a demon like Patriarch Shui Pao had to be eradicated. Back then, to deal with Patriarch Shui Pao, the Tao Lord revealed his immortal aura and was caught red-handed by the rank 9 immortal devouring beast. He was injured and died of depression. Hence, when it came to scheming, no one could compare to Patriarch Shui Pao. Working with someone like him was like asking a tiger for its skin. Lin Jin wouldn't do something so stupid. But before that, he had to figure out Patriarch Shui Pao's goal so he could be prepared. After all, Lin Jin had planned to get rid of the threat that was Patriarch Shui Pao. Patriarch Shui Pao smirked. "Curator, even if you're not an immortal, you're probably close to one. Let me ask you, do you know why there are no traces of immortals in this world? He was clearly digging a hole. Most people would definitely be very curious about this question. After all, the ancient Tao of immortals, flying in the sky and burrowing into the earth, living forever and being free from the universe was something that everyone yearned for. Especially those experts whose strength was extraordinary, the more they yearned for it. Having said that, Patriarch Shui Pao carefully observed the curator. It was a pity that the curator was wearing a mask, so Lin Jin couldn't see his expression. ***. Why is he the same as that prop from back then? Why is he wearing a mask? Is he too ashamed to show his face? Patriarch Shui Pao fumed. At the curator's lack of reaction, Patriarch Shui Pao's heart skipped a beat. He could only bite the bullet and continue. Aren't you curious about the whereabouts of immortals, curator? You know? Lin Jin caught the crux of the matter. Chapter 608. Patriarch Shui Pao mentioned traces of immortals, but never mentioned the fall of immortals. In other words, this old demon knew that immortals still existed in this world. Truth be told, if this was a few days ago, Lin Jin would have been curious. But not anymore. Back in the visitation hall, Lin Jin had met Qin Yunshang and Chun Xiankong with his own eyes. He also learned about the current situation in the foreign lands from them. Hence, Lin Jin already knew many of the secrets of immortality. Patriarch Shui Pao was still trying to fool him with something he already knew. Of course, it was useless. However, Lin Jin was still curious. He was curious how Patriarch Shui Pao knew about these things. Of course I know. I know even more secrets. Patriarch Shui Pao was brimming with confidence. He hoped that curator would continue asking him questions. This way, he would be able to take the initiative and achieve his goal step by step. However, to Patriarch Shui Pao's surprise, curator didn't ask any more questions. It seemed like he wasn't interested in this at all. Patriarch Shui Pao was shocked. His rhythm was thrown off. He mused, that's impossible. No expert in this world can resist the temptation of immortality. Why isn't this curator playing by the rules? Patriarch Shui Pao, who was a little flustered, immediately composed himself and took the initiative to speak. Curator, I can see that although your cultivation level is high and your abilities are extensive, you have yet to reach the immortal realm. If you promise me one thing, I will give you an immortal Tao opportunity and help you become immortal. This could be considered as a naked temptation. No one could resist the chance to become immortal. Who didn't know how great immortals were? Immortals were immortal, possessed supernatural powers, and were free to roam the world. Lin Jin chuckled. What's so great about being an immortal? I'm not interested. Indeed, he wasn't interested. With a rank 9 immortal devouring beast around, becoming immortals was suicidal. A Tao Lord was a living example. No matter how powerful a human was, it was meaningless if they couldn't defeat a rank 9 immortal devouring beast. Curator's answer clearly shocked Patriarch Shui Pao. For a moment, Patriarch Shui Pao didn't know what to say and fell into silence. If you have nothing to say, then there's no need to keep you. Lin Jin broke the silence. Invoking a spell, the spirit refining needle began approaching. Patriarch Shui Pao's psyche immediately sensed danger. Wait a minute, curator. If you're not interested in becoming an immortal, then do you know that there are still immortals in this world? If you promise me one thing, I can tell you where the immortals live in seclusion. It was another bombshell. Had it been a few days ago, Lin Jin would definitely be curious to know the answer. But now Lin Jin was sure that Patriarch Shui Pao was referring to an extraterrestrial land. Since he already knew, he naturally wasn't interested. Not interested. With a flick of his finger, Lin Jin's spirit refinement needle forced Patriarch Bloodbubble's bloody face to contort. Don't. Hold on. Patriarch Shui Pao was getting anxious. This was completely out of his expectations. Even this news couldn't move the curator. He couldn't believe what the curator was interested in. Or could it be that the curator already knew about these things? At this thought, Patriarch Shui Pao's heart skipped a beat. His imagination ran wild as he suddenly thought of a possibility. Patriarch Shui Pao had been observing this world for hundreds of years, so he knew a lot of things. However, this curator's sudden rise was an accident. It was as if he was a character who came out of nowhere, an expert who rose overnight. This didn't make sense. Moreover, the curator wasn't interested in the existence of immortals at all. This made Patriarch Shui Pao think of another possibility. Patriarch Shui Pao asked tentatively with a shaky voice, "Could it be that the curator is from the Black Mountain?" This sentence was a little more tentative. Lin Jin immediately knew what was going on. A series of thoughts flashed through his mind before he said, "There are 9 mountains in the extraterrestrial land. The Black Mountain is nothing." At this, Patriarch Shui Pao couldn't even hide the shock on his face. No matter how hard he tried to suppress it, it was useless. Patriarch Shui Pao was already stuttering in shock. Deep down, Lin Jin knew that his attempt to trick Patriarch Shui Pao had worked. Moments later, as if coming back to his senses, Patriarch Shui Pao quickly said, "I must have been blind. So the curator is from the extraterrestrial land. No wonder, no wonder." After a pause, he quickly asked, "May I know which sect curator belongs to?" This question obviously wasn't a problem for Lin Jin. He recalled Qin Yunshang and Chun Xuankong's sects in the visitation hall. Among them, Xiandao sect was definitely one of the largest sects in the immortal realm with a long history. It wouldn't be a problem to use them to boost their reputation. At this, Lin Jin asked, "Have you heard of the Xiandao immortal sect?" Patriarch Shui Pao's blood-red face wavered. He was obviously shocked by this question. So the curator is from the Xiandao immortal sect. Patriarch Shui Pao's voice was much softer this time. He even seemed to be speaking in a humble manner. Best of all, he was acting this way willingly. Other than that, there was also a hint of fawning and fear in his voice. His tone and attitude were completely different from before. "I was once tutored by Xiandao sect's spiritual master Miao Yin, so I can be considered half a disciple of the great master. Now, curator, you and I can be considered half a fellow disciple," Patriarch Shui Pao said in a friendly tone. "You really got something out of me," Lin Jin muttered inwardly. Of course, on the surface, Lin Jin didn't show any reaction, nor did he ask any questions. After all, Lin Jin didn't know anything about that spiritual master Miao Yin of the Xiandao immortal sect, nor did he know the details. If he spoke too much about this, he would definitely give himself away. On the other hand, Patriarch Shui Pao looked excited. "Curator, let's forget about the grudge between me and your disciple. Not only will I not pursue the matter, but I'll also reward him greatly. However, I'll need a small favor from you, curator." Perhaps feeling that they were closer now, Patriarch Shui Pao revealed the purpose of his visit. He had tried his best to subdue Hu Yuzhen and came to Black Wind Monster Sect for this matter. After listening carefully, Lin Jin finally understood what was going on. Patriarch Shui Pao needed curator's help to move something from his hideout. It sounded simple, but even an idiot would know that it wasn't as easy as Patriarch Shui Pao made it sound. Move something? Who could move something? Why did he have to ask curator for help? Besides, with Patriarch Shui Pao's skills, it wasn't difficult for him to create a clone. If it was something ordinary, he would have done it himself. Why would he need someone else's help? Everything else aside, if Patriarch Shui Pao could subdue Hu Yuzhen, he could control Hu Yuzhen or anyone else. Chapter 609. The ghost blood beast that tried to assassinate him at Tianxin City might even be related to Patriarch Shui Pao. In that case, there was a high chance that Patriarch Shui Pao knew the corpse cultivator as well. Why didn't he ask the corpse cultivator for help? The seemingly honest Patriarch Shui Pao was obviously hiding his true intentions. Lin Jin chuckled. However, Lin Jin didn't show it on his face. He merely chuckled and said, "Patriarch Shui Pao, if you don't tell the truth, I won't help you. I'll give you one last chance. If you don't speak now, I'll still have to destroy your divine will. Lin Jin couldn't possibly trust Patriarch Shui Pao, but he did want to know what the man was up to. If he could figure it out, it would be much easier to get rid of this guy in the future. Patriarch Shui Pao seemed hesitant. In the end, with an expression of desperation, he said, "Curator, you really can't blame me for hiding this. After all, my life is at stake. But since you want to know, I'll tell you. In fact, I was trying to escape back then. Since you're from a foreign land, you should know about immortal devouring beasts." Patriarch Shui Pao recounted his past. Back then, Patriarch Shui Pao was a unique blood demon from a foreign land. Later on, he was enlightened by Reverend Yaoyin of the Xiandao immortal sect and started cultivating. Once his cultivation reached a certain level, he left the foreign land and arrived at the continents of Middle-earth. After that, he and a few demon brothers did something big. In fact, it was what the continents called the chaos of the 5 patriarchs. Patriarch Shui Pao was one of them. Later on, he was defeated by the human emperor. I don't know what method those human experts used, but they actually guided the human immortal energy into my brothers' bodies. In the end, they summoned the immortal devouring beasts. My brothers were killed on the spot by the immortal devouring beasts. Thankfully, I was lucky enough to utilize a secret technique to escape. After that, I hid deep underground, not daring to show my face again. At this, Patriarch Shui Pao wore a helpless expression. It didn't look like he was faking it. Regardless of whether Patriarch Shui Pao was telling the truth or not, Lin Jin still listened to him. It was a mixture of truth and falsehood. The general direction was correct, but there were some details that Patriarch Shui Pao left out. However, Lin Jin was no fool, so he asked, "I'll say it again. Patriarch Shui Pao, what do you want me to move? If you're not clear about it, or you're hiding something, go find someone else. As for this divine sense of yours, I won't keep it." Patriarch Shui Pao hurriedly said, "Don't, curator. I'll speak, all right?" After pondering for a moment, Patriarch Shui Pao said, "It's just a corpse. If you help me move a corpse away, I will definitely repay your kindness." "What corpse?" Lin Jin was stunned as a strange thought popped into his mind. "All right, I won't hide it from you anymore. I'll tell you everything. It's an immortal's corpse." Back then, those human experts were sinister and vicious. They weren't a match for us 5 patriarchs in a head-on fight, so they resorted to underhanded means to plant immortal corpses into our bodies. That's how the immortal aura attracted the immortal devouring beasts to kill us. There was a hint of hatred in Patriarch Shui Pao's words. To put it bluntly, because of that immortal's corpse, I haven't dared to come out all these years. Once I do, the immortal devouring beasts will surely attack me unless you help me move that corpse away. At this point, Lin Jin finally understood. After all, the human experts weren't immortals, so how could they fight the 5 patriarchs? So this was the method they used: killing with a borrowed knife. Brilliant! After that, Patriarch Bloodcloak seemed to really be honest with Yang Qi. He told him many things, such as the fact that the immortal's corpse had been imbued with some sort of powerful restriction, making it impossible for him to get it out. Other mortals couldn't do it either. Only an expert who was close to an immortal could do it. Hence, based on this, it seemed logical that Patriarch Shui Pao would seek Curator's help. Lin Jin couldn't see any problems with it. However, Lin Jin knew that Patriarch Shui Pao was hiding something else. However, it seemed like he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him no matter how much he asked. He had no reason to suspect that Patriarch Shui Pao had already answered all his questions and his answers were reasonable. Apart from that, Patriarch Shui Pao also promised Lin Jin some benefits. It was hard to refuse. Lin Jin paced back and forth as if he was thinking and hesitating. Meanwhile, the fake Lin Jin in a corner glared at Patriarch Shui Pao. Everything was perfect. After waiting for a while, Lin Jin said, "Even if I want to help you, I need to know where it is." In other words, he was agreeing to help. Patriarch Shui Pao was overjoyed. He quickly said, "My real body is hiding somewhere in grassy continent. If Curator agrees, I can lead the way." Don't worry, curator. Whether or not I succeed, I will give you the treasures I've kept for years as a token of my gratitude. I won't go back on my word. In fact, Lin Jin knew where Patriarch Shui Pao was hiding, but he wouldn't tell Patriarch Shui Pao. Just like how Patriarch Shui Pao must be hiding something from Lin Jin. All right, I could try to help you, but I don't know if I'll succeed, Lin Jin agreed. But we'll have to wait until tomorrow. There's been too many things to do today, and I'm tired. Of course. Patriarch Shui Pao chuckled, musing that it was good that he agreed. Patriarch Shui Pao, you're a guest from afar, so I can't just let you float around like this. Why don't you rest in this cave abode? I'll call for you tomorrow. Having said that, without waiting for a response, Lin Jin cast a spell and nailed Patriarch Shui Pao to the wall. With this, Patriarch Shui Pao couldn't move or leave. Having said that, curator and the fake Lin Jin left together. After the duo left, and there was no one else in the cave abode, Patriarch Shui Pao's expression turned menacing. But it was only for a fleeting moment before he closed his eyes and fell into a deep slumber. To the Black Wind Monster sect, curator was their signboard, their grandmaster. Of course, most of the time, people like him wouldn't be involved in the sect's construction. In other words, curator didn't have to stay at Black Wind Monster sect all the time. Forget curator. Even Lin Jin didn't need him. The sect's rules had been set. All the monster sect disciples had to do was follow them strictly. With the enforcement team and Taoist who watching over them, there wouldn't be any problems. After briefing Taoist who, the next day, Lin Jin, disguised as curator, brought Patriarch Shui Pao's blood-red face to grassy continent and rode a cloud. Lin Jin's cloud riding skill had now reached a higher level, especially after refining the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it had reached the acme of perfection. Lin Jin was currently wearing curator's mask, dressed in long robes that fluttered in the wind. The Four Seas Freedom Gourd and breezy sword hung from his waist as he stood on top of a cloud with his hands behind his back. Clouds swirled beneath his feet, making him look like an immortal. Chapter 610. As for Patriarch Shui Pao's psyche, it was being controlled by the needles to guide the way. Both of them seemed to be chatting happily along the way, but in reality, they each had their own agendas. Patriarch Shui Pao, in particular, was clearly immobilized by the needles. Despite the excruciating pain, he had a faint smile on his face. It was needless to say how aggrieved he was feeling. Just you wait. The first thing I'll do when I'm free is to destroy you. Patriarch Shui Pao was seething with hatred. However, he was also surprised because this was the first time he had met an expert who could easily hurt his psyche. Those needles were especially impressive for being able to pierce through his psyche. The cloud was traveling at an incredible speed, surpassing the speed of an average eagle. It would only take them a few hours to get to Grassy Continent. Lin Jin and Patriarch Shui Pao chatted along the way without any awkward silence. Half a day later, they arrived at Grassy Continent. Although it was a desolate place, it was much better than Liang Continent. Moments later, they arrived at a mountain range. There were no signs of human activity here. This was where Patriarch Shui Pao was hiding. Lin Jin scanned the area and was overwhelmed with emotions. This place was very similar to the one in Daolord's painting. The painting depicted this place where Daolord was supposed to kill Patriarch Shui Pao, but was injured by a rank 9 immortal devouring beast instead. Due to the world created by Little Book Pavilion, Lin Jin had entered the corresponding world before. Hence, he was overwhelmed with emotions upon arriving here today. Curator, the hiding place of my true body is right below. Patriarch Shui Pao pointed downwards. All right. Lin Jin steered the cloud to descend quickly. Under normal circumstances, this place looked like a mountain range. It wouldn't be easy to find the entrance to Patriarch Shui Pao's lair. But with Patriarch Shui Pao around, this shouldn't be an issue. Along the way, Lin Jin found the entrance to a cave hidden away from the sun in the valley. This entrance looked ordinary and could only fit one person at most. But upon entering, It was a sight to behold. It turned out that there was a whole other world hidden inside. Lin Jin's brows furrowed as he stared at the complex underground cave that resembled an ant's nest. There were more than a dozen caves that could be seen at the moment, and after entering each cave, there would definitely be more branches. From the looks of it, this place was simply a maze. More complicated than a maze. Moreover, Lin Jin wasn't lying when he said this was an ant nest. This was indeed a giant ant nest. Several large ant beasts were crawling in the darkness, waiting for an opportunity to strike. These ant beasts were a size larger than ordinary bulls. They should be some kind of rare exotic beast. Lin Jin found an opportunity to use his finger to appraise the ant. Underground Palace Ant Beast, 3rd rank, Earth Attribute. Large in size, good at digging holes, low in intelligence, likes to live in groups. There are 3 ways to advance, which are, after reading the museum's appraisal results, Lin Jin said to Patriarch Xue Pao's psyche, "You're quite capable to be able to control this nest of ants." Patriarch Xue Pao immediately said, "It's just a small trick. After all, I was the one who hid here first." If you think about it, these underground ant beasts are the outsiders. After a long time, they will get to know each other and be considered neighbors. Lin Jin could tell that Patriarch Xue Pao was being nonchalant. However, Lin Jin knew that while most of these ants were only rank 3, their combat strength was terrifying. Even rank 4 and rank 5 pet beasts wouldn't dare to provoke them. The reason was simple. These ants only moved underground and lived in groups. If they were provoked, they would swarm up and fight with their numbers. Anyone would feel their scalp go numb when faced with hundreds or thousands of ants. Even a rank 4 pet beast would be surrounded and killed if they weren't careful. As long as it was an Earth Palace ant beast, it would definitely be controlled by an insect queen. According to Patriarch Xue Pao, the insect queen here was also a demonic beast. This place was truly a dragon's pool and tiger's den. Even if an expert were to find out where Patriarch Xue Pao was and ambush him, it would be extremely difficult. It might even be a one-way trip. Even an expert would not be able to withstand the onslaught of this nest of Earth Palace ant beasts. "Curator, this way, please." Patriarch Xue Pao led the way with his psyche, but didn't mention the ants again. But just because he didn't mention them didn't mean they didn't exist. Along the way, Lin Jin noticed that there were a lot of ants here. There were at least several hundred of them, and that didn't include the ones that were still in hiding. Under the mask, Lin Jin smirked. Patriarch Xue Pao had made a good move. Although he didn't say anything and seemed nonchalant, he was actually trying to intimidate Lin Jin. Truth be told, Lin Jin would have been intimidated if this had happened in the past. After all, if he were to be surrounded by a swarm of ants underground, escaping would be as difficult as ascending to heaven. But things were different now. Putting aside his 2 rank 5 pet beasts, his 2 newly acquired treasures were enough to deal with most situations. One of them was the Divine Path Sword Scroll, an immortal sword, and the other was the 4 Seas Unfettered Gourd, a treasure that could create an ocean out of thin air. If Lin Jin was forced into a corner, he could just flood the ants' nest and drown them no matter how powerful they were. Hence, Lin Jin was confident. He wasn't afraid at all. Other than that, Lin Jin kept an eye out. After all, Patriarch Xue Pao was an old demon that had lived for thousands of years. Did he really think that a nest of ants could scare Lin Jin? It might just be a smokescreen, Patriarch Xue Pao must have something up his sleeves. With his guard up, Lin Jin continued moving forward. Twisting and turning, they walked through the incomparably complicated ant nest. Even with a photographic memory, they could not remember the route back and forth. After all, most of the forks were the same. This underground palace ant beast was an exotic beast with obsessive-compulsive disorder. It used sand, stones, and mucus to build the nest, and many places were carved from the same mold. This gave Lin Jin a headache. After all, he had no idea that there was such a large nest of ants here. Since he couldn't remember the route, there was nothing he could do. He could only deal with whatever came his way. At most, he would resort to other methods. Like Heaven and Earth Inc. Lin Jin had plenty of trump cards anyway. Moments later, Lin Jin arrived at a large cave. This must be right below the ant nest. It was a natural cave with a large surface area. In front of him was the silhouette of a giant, leaning against the stone wall. Lin Jin took a closer look. Despite his vast experience, he was still shocked. Although the giant was sitting down, his size was astounding. Just his palms alone were bigger than an average person. When he stood up, he was at least 100 feet tall. Also, he was a fatty. Chapter 611. The giant was crimson in color and draped in a large crimson robe. It looked as if it was carved out of blood-colored amber. At the sight of this, Lin Jin's pupils dilated. He knew that this must be Patriarch Shui Pao's true form. The color of blood was murky but transparent. Lin Jin could see a figure sitting cross-legged in the giant's chest. This figure seemed to be wearing a Taoist robe. His eyes were closed, and he was probably dead. However, there was a faint trace of immortal energy emanating from him. At this, Lin Jin knew that what Patriarch Shui Pao had said was true. For example, if an immortal's corpse was inserted into his body, if he didn't suppress it and hide, the immortal's energy would definitely leak out. When that happened, it would definitely provoke a rank 9 immortal devouring beast. It was no wonder Patriarch Shui Pao dared not come out. Patriarch Shui Pao's psyche floated up, trying to return to his body. However, Lin Jin forcefully pulled it back with his needle. "Curator, what are you doing?" Patriarch Shui Pao was anxious. His psyche was precious, so he wanted to keep it safe as long as possible. Moreover, now that they were in Patriarch Shui Pao's territory, this psyche was much more confident than before. "There's no rush. I still prefer you like this. If your psyche returns to your body, I won't be used to it." Lin Jin smiled, unconcerned. Having said that, he stepped forward, and with a flick of his finger, a needle flew out and pierced into the blood giant's body. In an instant, Patriarch Shui Pao's condition was recorded into the Museum of Deadly Beasts. Unlike a clone, this was the real body's information. Lin Jin mused, damn it. Just as he expected, Patriarch Shui Pao was a rank 7 monster. Before this, Lin Jin had already deduced Patriarch Shui Pao's strength. After all, he was able to wreak havoc in the world back then, so his strength shouldn't be underestimated. Lin Jin had speculated that the man was at least rank 6 or above. Now, it seemed like his guess was right. How dangerous. Lin Jin glanced at the immortal's corpse that seemed to be embedded in Patriarch Shui Pao's body, musing, thank goodness this thing is suppressing it. Otherwise, if Patriarch Shui Pao were to show himself, there would probably be another bloodbath. In fact, almost no one in this world could match him. 1,000 years ago, there were still immortal corpses that could be used, but what about now? Lin Jin pondered and made up his mind. No matter what, he couldn't bring out the immortal's corpse that was suppressing Patriarch Shui Pao's body. In fact, Lin Jin felt a great sense of danger when he read the museum's evaluation of Patriarch Shui Pao. Previously, when he encountered the 9th-tier immortal devouring beast, it was just a fleeting appearance. Moreover, he knew that as long as he did not become an immortal, he would not attract the immortal devouring beast. However, Patriarch Shui Pao was different. Now that the rank 7 monster was right in front of him, Lin Jin realized that his 2 pet beasts were only rank 5. They were clearly not enough. No, Xiaohua and the ghost blood beast must continue to evolve. They must reach rank 6 at least. Lin Jin gritted his teeth. However, he didn't have the time for that now. Fortunately, Lin Jin was wearing the curator's mask, so no one could see his current expression. This was the advantage of wearing a mask. To outsiders, he looked calm and unfathomable. "Curator, this is my body. You've seen the immortal's corpse for yourself. There's a seal on it that I can't break. I hope you can lend me a hand, Curator," Patriarch Shui Pao suddenly said. At the same time, the blood giant's palm opened up slightly and rays of golden light shone out. Patriarch Shui Pao was obviously hiding a powerful artifact in his palm. "If you can help me, I'll give this artifact to you, curator. Patriarch Shui Pao threw out a bait. Lin Jin focused his gaze and saw a golden seal in Patriarch Shui Pao's palm. The seal was golden in color, as if it was forged from gold. On top was a Qilin beast, while below was a square seal. Everything else aside, just the vibrant colors on its surface was enough to tell that it was no ordinary item. This is the Qilin Mountain Suppression Seal. It was passed down from an ancient immortal and possesses extraordinary power. Curator, you may take this as a token of appreciation. Patriarch Shui Pao looked pained, as if this artifact was incredibly important. Lin Jin had only taken a glance at it when Patriarch Shui Pao's palm closed. It seemed like the treasure wasn't going to be shown to anyone easily. Admittedly, an immortal's artifact was indeed tempting. However, Lin Jin wasn't an inexperienced person. He already had two, or rather, three artifacts in his possession. One was the immortal binding rope, the other was the Four Seas unfettered gourd, and the last was the breezy sword. Hence, Lin Jin wasn't particularly interested in the Qilin Mountain Suppression Seal. Moreover, Lin Jin was almost certain that even if he helped Patriarch Shui Pao move the immortal's corpse, the man wouldn't give it to him as he had promised. Moreover, Lin Jin had never intended to let Patriarch Shui Pao escape from this place. So what if he was a rank 7 monster? If he had the ability to come out, he would have turned the world upside down. So if Lin Jin didn't make a move now, when would he? Lin Jin flipped his palm over, and several needles of different sizes appeared at his palm. One of them was the Thunderfire needle that Lin Jin had refined himself. Most of the artifacts Lin Jin had on him were obtained by chance. He didn't refine many of them himself, and the Thunderfire needle was one of them. It was the most powerful artifact Lin Jin had ever refined. Tempered by divine Thunderfire, its power was astounding. Now that Lin Jin had achieved some success in the body fortification and spirit refinement needle, using the Thunderfire needle was like adding wings to a tiger. Since the immortal's corpse inside the blood giant was the key, Lin Jin had to investigate it first. Lin Jin planned to use the Thunderfire needle to probe the corpse. With a flick of his finger, several needles, including the Thunderfire needle, flew out and pierced into the blood giant's body before approaching the immortal's corpse. Patriarch Shui Pao was also watching nervously, but there was a trace of inexplicable coldness in his eyes. Finally, when the needles came into contact with the immortal's corpse, Lin Jin's expression changed. "Curator, how is it?" Patriarch Shui Pao asked anxiously. Lin Jin fell into deep thought. After a moment, Lin Jin sighed and shook his head. "To tell you the truth, there's an extremely powerful seal on this immortal's corpse. Even I can't break it." At this, Patriarch Shui Pao was visibly disappointed. "Is there really nothing we can do?" Patriarch Shui Pao asked again. Lin Jin shook his head. "There's nothing we can do. This seal is vast and boundless. It's impossible to move the corpse with our strength." This time, Lin Jin was resolute. Patriarch Shui Pao fell silent. Obviously, this was definitely not good news for him. After a moment, Patriarch Shui Pao let out a long sigh. "This is fate. All right, I admit defeat." Having said that, he turned to the curator. But this time, Patriarch Shui Pao's eyes were no longer as polite and amiable as before. Instead, they were filled with malevolence. "Since you can't help, I won't keep you any longer." Just as he said that, something unexpected happened. A sharp aura descended from the sky, aiming for Lin Jin's head. At the same time, several withered arms suddenly reached out from the ground beneath Lin Jin's feet, grabbing onto his feet. In the blink of an eye, Lin Jin was in mortal danger. Chapter 612. Lin Jin didn't panic at all. In fact, he was already prepared for this. Patriarch Shui Pao had put on a good show earlier, but Lin Jin had never trusted him. Moreover, the breezy monster was the most sensitive to murderous auras. From the moment Lin Jin stepped foot into this place, the breezy monster had been warning him. Hence, Lin Jin waited patiently for the enemy to strike. Slash! Lin Jin only uttered one word before the breezy monster by his waist shot out like a beam of light. Two beams of light slashed down from above and below his feet. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Without moving, Lin Jin used the breeze monster's sword to nullify the attack. Above him, a black shadow descended. It was a strange-looking ant beast. Its lower body was that of an insect, while its upper body was that of a woman. However, the woman's expression was ferocious as she gritted her teeth. One of her insect limbs had been severed by the sword energy, and it was bleeding profusely. Below her feet, several zombies with severed limbs crawled out of the soil. Some of them were even severed at the waist by the sword energy. Even if they managed to crawl out, they would soon stop moving. Elsewhere, the corpse cultivator appeared with a dark expression. Behind him, a deathly aura billowed, and the figure of a five-clawed zombie dragon swayed. At this, Lin Jin smirked. I knew it. The corpse cultivator and patriarch Shui Pao were in cahoots with each other. Lin Jin had guessed this back at Tianxian City, and now it was confirmed. As for that half-human, half-insect female demon beast, it was no surprise that she was the insect queen of the underground palace ant beasts. She was also patriarch Shui Pao's helper. Lin Jin flicked his finger and shot a needle at the insect queen. However, the insect queen blocked it with her sturdy insect limbs and sneered in disdain. Child's play. In fact, Lin Jin wasn't thinking of using a single needle to hurt her. He was only trying to gauge the insect queen's strength. As expected, it's only a rank 5 monster. Although it's a rare beast, it can at most fight Xiao Hua to a draw, Lin Jin calculated. Based on the current situation, the corpse cultivator and the insect queen seemed to have the upper hand. Not to mention, there was also Patriarch Shui Pao, who had an unknown amount of combat power. On the other hand, he was alone. No matter how he looked at it, he was at a disadvantage. Curator, you didn't expect this, did you? Even if you have unparalleled powers, you won't be able to escape death today. The corpse Dao said with a hideous voice. The last time he was at Tianxian Royal City, he returned in failure. He had been suppressing his anger for a long time, and this time, he could finally release it. Killing the curator was now his primary goal. Then, the corpse Dao said to Patriarch Shui Pao, Patriarch Shui Pao, don't hide it anymore. This curator's cultivation base is very high. We need the 3 of us to work together. Otherwise, if we let him escape, there will be endless troubles in the future. In other words, he was telling Patriarch Shui Pao that the curator already knew where he was hiding and that he had already fallen out with him. If he didn't make up his mind to eliminate him, the curator would definitely come back for revenge. So there was only one way to go. Corpse Dao, even if you didn't say that, I would have done the same thing. This curator is clearly not an immortal, but he's putting on an act. He thinks he can fool me. What a joke. Patriarch Shui Pao sneered. Fresh blood gushed out of the blood giant's body and quickly gathered on Patriarch Shui Pao's psyche. With a loud boom, an invisible malevolent aura erupted, forcing out the spirit refining needle Lin Jin had buried. The next moment, the blood and psyche combined to form a new clone of Patriarch Shui Pao. Its aura had surpassed that of the insect queen and the corpse Dao. It was now on par with the zombie dragon. Patriarch Shui's clone smirked. Curator, since you can't move the immortal's corpse, there's no point in keeping you around. Killing you and devouring your flesh and blood will at least strengthen me. Who knows, maybe after a few 100 years, I'll be able to break the immortal's seal. When that happens, I'll be free to roam the world. Patriarch Shui Pao, don't waste your breath on him. Let's attack together and kill the curator to prevent any unforeseen circumstances, the corpse Dao said with a sinister smile. At the same time, a deathly fog began to spread behind him. The zombie dragon let out a roar, clearly agitated. Lin Jin remained calm. At this moment, Lin Jin was as calm as ever. He had no intention of escaping, as if everything was under his control. Corpse Dao, Patriarch Shui Pao, do you really think you've won? Lin Jin's voice carried a hint of mockery and contempt. Isn't that the case? Forget about the fact that you're not an immortal. Even if you were, you'd still die if the three of us ganged up on you. We don't have that many people to help you this time. Dao Corpse had a confident look on his face. This time, they had meticulously planned everything out. Furthermore, it was a surprise attack. Even if the curator was on guard, he wouldn't have expected that there would be 3 experts ganging up on him. However, the curator's tone gave the corpse Dao an ominous feeling. It sounded like the curator wasn't afraid. In fact, he wasn't surprised to see the corpse Dao either. Could it be that the curator knew I would ambush him here? No, that's impossible. He can't possibly know. He must be bluffing. The corpse Dao calculated. Attack! The corpse Dao didn't plan to wait any longer. The zombie dragon behind him immediately swirled up a cloud of deathly fog and pounced forward with a force to engulf the world. At the same time, the queen insect's tail let out a strange noise. She was summoning the ant beasts. Instantly, the rumbling of an army could be heard. If there were thousands of ant beasts surrounding and attacking them, no matter who it was, they would have to suffer. Patriarch Shui Pao made his move as well. However, a cloud of bloody fog erupted from his body. It instantly spread over 1,000 feet, forming a barrier that trapped everyone within. Inside the barrier, Patriarch Shui Pao had more tricks up his sleeves. He was undefeatable. The surrounding ant beasts weren't in a hurry, as they wouldn't be able to reach him anytime soon. However, the zombie dragon couldn't be ignored. Lin Jin immediately called out, "Breeze, come, slay the dragon." In an instant, sword rays swirled like stars in the sky. Then, like the reflection of the moon on a river's surface, a cold glint flashed past. Following that, the ferocious and insufferably arrogant zombie dragon let out a pained wail before retreating hastily. In the blink of an eye, the victor had been decided. Dao Corpse's eyes widened in disbelief. After all, ever since he refined Dao Dragon's pet beast into a zombie dragon, this was the first time he encountered such a situation. In a direct confrontation, he was actually defeated in a head-on battle. Taking a closer look, there was a sword wound on the zombie dragon's neck. It was more than 10 feet long, and the wound was so deep that the bone could be seen. If it wasn't for the fact that the zombie dragon's skin was as tough as metal, its head would have long been chopped off by the sword. Even so, the zombie dragon was gravely injured. It would need to slowly heal its wounds with death energy, or else its combat strength will be greatly reduced. The zombie dragon was immediately put at a disadvantage against the breezy demon sword. Even Lin Jin was surprised by this. Chapter 613. Seems like studying the Divine Sword Scroll has greatly improved the breezy monster sword. Lin Jin mumbled to himself. This indirectly proved how powerful the Divine Path Sword Scroll was. However, back then, Lin Jin didn't know the wonders of this immortal-grade sword art. Even if he learned it, he could only scratch the surface. He couldn't even be considered a beginner. Only with the breezy monster sword was it truly useful. With a wave of his hand, there was a flash of light, and a sword appeared in Lin Jin's hand. He sheathed it in an elegant manner, just like a sword immortal. The corpse cultivator was off to a bad start, but now that the ant beasts had gathered and Patriarch Shui Pao's world of blood was completed, the real battle was about to begin. "Curator, I will grind your bones to dust today." The Dao corpse was already mad with anger. At this moment, he felt lucky that he had made the right decision to team up with ancestor Shui Pao to plot against the curator. Otherwise, if he was alone, there was no way he could be a match for the curator. In other words, the curator didn't even show his power in Tianxian Royal City. Or rather, the curator didn't even make a move himself. At this, the corpse cultivator was furious, but at the same time, he felt lucky. Just as he said, the curator was powerful, but no matter how powerful he was, he couldn't possibly withstand the combined attacks of the 3 of them, especially Patriarch Shui Pao. While Patriarch Shui Pao didn't dare to move recklessly due to the immortal's corpse, fearing that his aura would attract the immortal devouring beasts, his clone still had the strength of an immortal. Not to mention, while the underground ant queen wasn't strong, she had tens of thousands of ant soldiers. Their combined strength was enough to destroy everything. Hence, no matter what, the curator had to die today. Their surroundings were now dyed in the color of blood. This was the uniqueness of boundary spells. Lin Jin took a closer look and realized that the original cave was no longer there. It was as if he was in another world. Not only that, but ant beasts kept appearing, and there were now thousands of them. Everything else aside, these fearless ant beasts alone were troublesome enough to deal with. Sure enough, Patriarch Xue Pao and the corpse cultivator were prepared. It seemed like they were determined to kill Lin Jin today. Undeniably, even if Lin Jin was an immortal, he was at an absolute disadvantage in this situation, even if he had many treasures. But he remained calm and collected, not panicking in the slightest, because Lin Jin did have a trump card. It was at this moment that an ear-piercing eagle cry resounded. It seemed to descend from the heavens, penetrating through the rock layer of the mountain and breaking through the barrier of the blood world, allowing everyone to hear it extremely clearly. Truth be told, the Breeze monster sword attack was terrifying, even breathtaking. Not only did it break through the blood world's barrier, but it had also pierced through the 1,000-foot rock layer and emerged from the mountain. Perhaps even an immortal wouldn't be able to do this, right? Lin Jin looked down at the Breeze monster sword at his waist and shook his head. That attack earlier had consumed a lot of energy. The Breeze monster sword wouldn't be able to be unsheathed for at least 2 to 4 hours. The blade spirit was now asleep, so he must have overexerted himself. I was too reckless, Lin Jin mumbled to himself. But if he had to do it again, he would do it again. Everything else aside, just the impact and effect alone was worth it. Fortunately, Lin Jin had plenty of trump cards up his sleeves. Even if he didn't use the Breeze monster sword, he could still do it. Moreover, he had Taoist Hu and the Golden Winged monster's help. On the other side, Taoist Corpse, the Ant Queen, and Blood Ancestor's clone flew out as well, looking rather pathetic. Just then, the Insect Queen let out a wail. Her underground palace's anthill had been completely destroyed, and the number of ant beasts that had perished beneath was uncountable. This was equivalent to flattening the Insect Queen's home. Anyone would be enraged by this. Of course, not all of the underground ant beasts had perished. There were always some that survived, but their numbers were less than 100. This amount of ant beasts could no longer pose a threat and was practically negligible. This was the result of the Breeze monster sword's attack. Hence, the few hours that the monster sword was asleep was actually a win for them. Blood Ancestor's clone wore a menacing expression. What was supposed to be a good hand and a good situation had been turned around in an instant. No one would be able to accept this. However, Patriarch Xue Pao's physical body wouldn't suffer any damage. After all, he was a rank 7 demon. This small commotion probably wouldn't even leave a scratch on him. But this was a huge blow to his reputation. Scheming against someone else only to have the roof of his home flipped over. How embarrassing. Moreover, Lin Jin's attack earlier had truly frightened Patriarch Xue Pao. Chapter 614. That attack was definitely worthy of being called an immortal's attack. In fact, it was even stronger than that. In Patriarch Xue Pao's eyes, it even had the will of a true immortal. That was terrifying. He knew that immortals were divided into 3 realms. Leaving the pseudo-immortal realm aside, true immortals were the most common. Even if Patriarch Xue Pao came out in his true form, he wouldn't dare to fight a true immortal. If he did, he would run as far away as he could. Due to this reason, Patriarch Xue Pao was a little hesitant. But on second thought, he knew that Curator couldn't be a true immortal. If he was, forget the 3 of them, even a few more would be useless. Moreover, if he was a true immortal, once he revealed his aura, the immortal devouring beast would notice him. Back in the day, countless true immortals were killed by immortal devouring beasts. In terms of terror, immortal devouring beasts were the most terrifying, as long as he wasn't a true immortal. Patriarch Xue Pao had seen the world. To him, while the situation was complicated, they could still fight. It was just that they didn't have the upper hand like before. Both sides are now in a stalemate. The aftershock of Lin Jin's attack had yet to dissipate, but neither side attacked immediately. Instead, they were observing. After all, Curator now had two more helpers. Both Patriarch Shui Pao and Dao Corpse had to figure out the situation. The next moment, Dao Corpse got a clear look at Dao Tiger. His heart skipped a beat as he felt a little guilty. On the other side, Daoist Tiger had already revealed his round form. He was a 300-meter tall tiger beast. However, this tiger beast was still mainly in human form. It was a half-human, half-beast form that Daoist Tiger had specially cultivated. At this moment, Daoist, who was staring at Daoist Corpse with anger in his eyes. Old four, although you've changed your body, I can recognize that aura. Back then, the six of us helped each other, and I've treated you well. Is this how you repay me? One could tell that Daoist, who was extremely angry at this moment. Lin Jin could understand why Dao Tiger was angry. Back then, the Six Paths Beast cultivators were fellow disciples of the Dao Lord. However, after the Dao Lord fell, the Six Paths Beast cultivators started to stir up trouble. Among them, the most sinister and evil ones were the corpse cultivators. Among the six beasts, Daoist Dragon ranked first, Daoist Tiger ranked second, Daoist Crane ranked third, and Daoist Corpse ranked fourth. Who would have thought that right after the Dao Lord passed away, Dao Corpse would ambush Dao Dragon and Dao Tiger? One died, and his pet beast was stolen while the other was gravely injured. He had to hide in Liangzhou to recuperate for 100 years. Daoist Tiger couldn't forget these hundreds of years of torture, so it would be strange if Daoist Tiger wasn't angry when he saw Daoist Corpse. Second brother, you're still alive, what a surprise. The corpse man's eyes froze. Although his tone was a bit teasing, he was already ready for battle. The others might not be Dao Tiger but of his Dao brother. Among the six-path beast men, Daoist Dragon was the eldest, but in terms of comprehension, cultivation, and battle prowess, Daoist Tiger was the strongest. In fact, Daoist Tiger's favorite disciple was also Daoist Tiger. After all, he had been raised from a young age, and their relationship was very deep. It was for this reason that Dao Corpse's jealousy toward Dao Tiger eventually turned into hatred. That was why he used a special spell to kill Daoist Tiger and refine him into a zombie. But even though he was fully prepared for a sneak attack, something still went wrong. Dao Tiger only escaped with heavy injuries. All these years, Dao Corpse had been searching everywhere, but couldn't find him. To think that they would meet again under such circumstances. On second thought, Dao Corpse thought of something terrifying. Who on earth was this curator? He was even able to find the Taoist Tiger. When did they get together? Moreover, Corpse Dao was very clear about the injuries that Tiger Dao had suffered. After all, it was him who did it. Even if he didn't die back then, he would be slowly corroded by the corpse poison. First his body, then his soul, and eventually, he would become a zombie. But now Dao Tiger was full of vigor. He didn't look injured at all. Obviously, Dao Tiger didn't have the ability to do this, so he must have gotten help from an outsider. Who? Was there even a need to ask? In the eyes of the Dao of Corpse, no one else in the world could have such supernatural powers and abilities other than the curator. Curator, you and I are irreconcilable. Dao Corpse gritted his teeth, but he didn't have the chance to fight the curator because Dao Tiger would be the first to come after him. Old four, on account that we're from the same sect, I'll give you a quick death today. Having said that, Dao Tiger saluted Lin Jin. Curator, I hope you won't stop me. I want to settle things with Dao Corpse. Knowing the grudge between Dao Tiger and Dao Corpse, Lin Jin didn't say much. He merely nodded and told Dao Corpse to be careful. To Lin Jin, although Dao Tiger had recovered from his injuries and his strength had improved, he was still lacking compared to Dao Corpse. This was mainly because Dao Corpse's zombie dragon was too terrifying. However, the zombie dragon had been severely injured after being slashed by Qingfeng's monster sword. So now, it seemed like they were evenly matched. With Dao Tiger's bravery, Lin Jin had a higher chance of winning. There was no need to stop him. Moreover, Lin Jin still had to deal with Patriarch Shui Pao. At this moment, the hundreds of ant beasts that were lucky enough to survive crawled out of the huge pit and gathered around the insect queen. The insect queen had only lost one of its insect limbs, which was not a serious injury. Instead, it had retained much of its combat power. Suddenly, strong winds howled overhead as the golden-winged monster swooped down. With a swipe of his golden claws, several ant beasts were caught in the air and flung 1,000 feet up. If they were to fall just like that, the ant beasts would be smashed into meat paste. Curator, I'll deal with that bloody figure and these insects. You can just rest and supervise the battle, the golden wing monster said. Rank 6 monsters were indeed domineering and powerful, which gave him the confidence to speak. Now, the golden wing monster was planning to take on both the blood ancestor's clone and the insect queen at the same time. After some thought, Lin Jin said, "Leave the insect queen to me. Please hold back the blood ancestor's clone and don't let him cause trouble." As he understood the situation the best, Lin Jin knew that if the golden wing monster were to take on 2 enemies at once, no matter how powerful he was at rank 6, he might not be able to gain the upper hand. This was mainly because the blood ancestor's clone was so powerful that he could go toe-to-toe with the golden wing monster. With this, Lin Jin had the golden wing monster hold back the blood ancestor's clone while he dealt with the insect queen. Now that they were outnumbered, he would have the upper hand. As the curator had saved his only son, the golden-winged monster wouldn't go against the curator's wishes. He pounced on the blood ancestor's clone at once. Both sides were powerful, so they clashed immediately. The insect queen wanted to help, but Lin Jin was one step ahead of her and stopped her. The underground palace ant beasts can be considered to be rare and precious beasts, and they aren't the vicious and evil type. Why would they help the wicked commit evil? Chapter 615. Lin Jin wasn't speaking without thinking. There was a premise behind his question. During the battle earlier, Lin Jin had appraised this insect queen and discovered that there was a blood talisman inside her body. Lin Jin immediately guessed that Patriarch Shui Pao must have used some underhanded method to gain control over this underground ant beast. He must have used threats and promises. If there was such a premise, Lin Jin's words were the start of something. If he could solve it with his mouth, why use his fists? Perhaps not only would he be able to easily defeat a powerful foe, but he could also rope him in to help him. Lin Jin wasn't going to let this opportunity slip by. Similarly, if things turned out as Lin Jin predicted, it would be a huge blow to Patriarch Shui Pao. Sure enough, a hint of surprise appeared on the insect queen's coquettish face. Sometimes, words didn't even need to be spoken. Just one expression was enough to tell someone something. And now, Lin Jin was able to glean something from this expression. At once, Lin Jin said, "Using a blood talisman as a means of coercion and promises isn't a wise decision. Insect Queen, I'll help you remove the blood talisman today. You can choose what you want to do next." Lin Jin knew that even if he wanted to remove the blood talisman, it would be extremely difficult. Moreover, if Patriarch Shui Pao noticed it and tried to stop him, it would be even more difficult. Hence, he had to catch the other party off guard. Now that he had said what he needed to say and done what he needed to, it was now up to this insect queen to make her decision. Even if she was stubborn, or if Lin Jin's deduction was wrong, it didn't matter. With Lin Jin's current cultivation and skills, it wouldn't be difficult for him to eliminate this insect queen. It all depended on whether the insect queen was willing to let the needles enter her body. Lin Jin raised his hand and flicked his fingers. More than 10 needles flew toward the insect queen in an instant. Just as the insect queen was about to react, Lin Jin said, "Only by inserting needles into your body can you remove the blood talisman. Think carefully." His words caused the insect queen's movements to slow down by a beat. The next instant, all the needles pierced into the insect queen's body. With this, Lin Jin had the upper hand. After all, the insect queen wasn't strong enough. Unlike Patriarch Shui Pao, who could force the needles out of its body even if they were inserted. The insect queen was only a rank 5 monster, so it was almost impossible for it to force Lin Jin's needle out on its own. In other words, for a demonic beast at the level of the insect queen, once the spirit-refining needle entered its body, the final outcome would basically be decided. The insect queen seemed to have sensed the pressure too, as she stood rooted to the spot. She glanced at Lin Jin before sneaking a glance at Blood Ancestor's clone. At that moment, the Blood Ancestor's clone and the Golden Winged Demon were locked in battle, so they had no time to care about anything else. Seeing this, Lin Jin felt even more confident. He immediately manipulated the needle to destroy the blood talisman Patriarch Shui Pao had left in the insect queen's body. This blood talisman only had magic power, but it could not be controlled by spiritual will, so it was relatively easier to deal with. After Lin Jin destroyed the blood talisman, Patriarch Shui Pao immediately sensed something and let out an angry roar. However, Lin Jin couldn't be bothered with him. The angrier Patriarch Shui Pao got, the better it was for Lin Jin. The insect mother immediately prostrated itself before Lin Jin. "Thank you, Curator, for saving my life." The insect mother was a monster that had cultivated for more than 100 years. With its high intelligence, most people would never be able to outsmart it. Meanwhile, Taoist Tiger and Taoist Corpse were engaged in a fierce battle. Both sides had a grudge against each other, so every time they made a move, they were aiming to take each other's lives. While the Golden Winged Demon and Patriarch Shui Pao were locked in a fierce battle, Lin Jin's side was quiet and peaceful. The insect mother was respectful, but Lin Jin couldn't possibly let his guard down. After all, he couldn't rule out the possibility that the insect mother and Patriarch Shui Pao were working together to put on a show. There was no harm in being more cautious. But in the end, Lin Jin was clearly overthinking things. The insect mother didn't launch a sneak attack. Instead, it remained respectful. It was obvious that it had been forced to serve Patriarch Shui Pao. "Curator, we, the underground ant beasts, have always stood aloof from worldly affairs. We choose our nests in deserted areas, but 100 years ago, we stumbled upon this place and were then controlled by Patriarch Shui Pao. Since then, we've been living a life worse than death. Now that we're free, I'm willing to lead the remaining ant beasts and follow you, Curator." Lin Jin was surprised by the insect mother's quick decision, but on second thought, it made sense. At a time like this, anyone with half a brain would know that they had to pick a side as soon as possible. In particular, the insect mother was already extremely dissatisfied with Patriarch Shui Pao. After all, the man had controlled the underground ant tribe for over 100 years and had probably exploited and enslaved many times. Now that the shackles have been loosened, it was only natural for the insect mother to rebel. Moreover, the insect mother had heard of the great Curator. Everything else aside, just the title of the world's strongest beast appraiser was enough to attract a monster like the insect mother. Even if it was for the sake of its own future, seeking refuge with the Curator was definitely a wise move. Moreover, if it wanted to seek revenge on Patriarch Shui Pao, relying on the insect mother and the less than 100 ant soldiers was a pipe dream. Hence, whether it was for survival or revenge, seeking refuge with the Curator was the only option. Lin Jin nodded. The underground ant beasts were extremely rare, even among rare beasts. If used wisely, the ant beasts could unleash terrifying power. However, it wasn't the right time to verify the insect mother's intentions. As long as it didn't get involved, everything would be fine. Lin Jin was confident in this. With the spirit refinement needle still inside the insect mother's body, if it had any ulterior motives, Lin Jin could kill it in an instant. After dealing with the insect mother's threat, Lin Jin turned to the fierce battle between the two sides. As expected of a rank 6 monster, the Golden Wing monster was even stronger than Lin Jin. Against Patriarch Shui Pao's clone, the Golden Wing monster was able to suppress the latter and launch fierce attacks. On the other side, Taoist 2 and Taoist Corpse were also locked in a stalemate. However, Taoist Corpse had the upper hand here. After all, the other side had a zombie dragon. Strictly speaking, it was a 2-on-1 battle. Taoist who was in a perilous situation several times. Seeing this, Lin Jin decided to make his move first. Since he couldn't use the Breeze monster sword yet, Lin Jin summoned Xiao Hua with a wave of his hand. The rank 5 firewolf was telepathically connected to Lin Jin. In its giant wolf form, it pounced at the zombie dragon to entangle it. With this, Taoist who could fight Corpse Taoist one-on-one and settle this grudge once and for all. At this moment, Dao Corpse was also a bit anxious. Taoist who was adept at using the Dark Wind spell. The strong winds around him were intimidating, but it was the perfect counter to his deathly aura. Although the aura was strong, it couldn't get close to him. Just as it got close, it would be blown away by the dark wind. Previously, with the zombie dragon's assistance, Corpse Taoist had the upper hand. But now that Xiao Hua was holding the zombie dragon back, Corpse Taoist was forced into a passive position. Chapter 6:16. In a one-on-one fight, Corpse Tao was no match for Dao Hu. After all, Corpse Tao was using someone else's corpse while his own body was still trapped in the painting realm. Moments later, Corpse Tao's body was so badly injured that his bones could be seen. One of his arms was missing as Dao Hu had ripped it off and crushed it with a spell. Run! Corpse Tao knew he was no match for Dao Hu. Now that his body was severely damaged, if he didn't leave now, he might not be able to escape even if he wanted to. In a situation like this, he couldn't even take care of himself, so he obviously didn't care if Patriarch Shui Pao was dead or alive. An aura of death spread out from behind Corpse Tao. The latter immediately tried to escape, but Dao Hu was already prepared for this. The moment he saw Corpse Tao retreating, he roared and leaped up. With a swipe of his tiger claws, a visible gust of wind whizzed out, blocking Corpse Tao's path. Wherever the gust of wind passed, rocks crumbled as if they were being chopped by an axe. Corpse Tao hesitated for a moment before he was caught up. Helpless, he could only fight Dao Hu again. There were a few times when Corpse Tao tried to summon the zombie dragon, but Xiao Hua kept him busy. Besides that, Lin Jin also made a move. Using the Four Seas Freedom Gourd to whip up huge waves, he managed to wash away the zombie dragon that tried to come over. Under the combined attack of water and fire, the zombie dragon couldn't even get close, let alone help. Corpse Tao grew increasingly anxious at this. Second brother, are you really going to disregard our brotherhood and be so ruthless? Corpse Tao was desperate, so he spoke up. He was begging for mercy. Corpse Tao's body was covered in claw marks so deep that bones could be seen. If he was a normal person, even an immortal would die. At the very least, he would bleed to death. However, a zombie's body was similar to an immortal body, so even if his organs were spilling out, Corpse Tao still didn't show any signs of dying. Fourth brother, did you ever care about brotherhood back then? Daoist whose words had directly killed Daoist Corpse. What Daoist Corpse had done in the past was indeed not a matter of friendship. It was not an exaggeration to say that he had betrayed Daoist Corpse. However, Daoist Corpse was only stalling for time. He found an opportunity and suddenly cast a technique. His body instantly changed, turning into a ferocious-looking corpse ghost with a mouth full of sharp teeth. His neck could actually twist and lengthen. He turned his head around, opened his mouth, and bit Daoist Tiger's chest. The sharp fangs carried a terrifying corpse aura as they pierced through the flesh. Tiger Priest screamed out in pain, followed by Corpse Priest's creepy laughter, which seemed especially creepy and scary. Even Lin Jin was caught off guard by this turn of events. Who would have thought that the Corpse Cultivator had this trick up his sleeves? However, it wouldn't be easy to completely refine Corpse Tao after devouring him. Right now, Daoist who was fighting against Corpse Tao's corpse aura. It all depended on who was stronger and who could last longer. The one who could last till the end would be the winner. If Daoist who won, the corpse aura would be completely refined and Corpse Tao would be considered dead. From then on, this abnormal creature would cease to exist. But if Corpse Tao won, the situation would be much more troublesome. Corpse aura would completely corrode and assimilate Daoist Hu. In the end, Daoist would turn into a zombie tiger beast, while Corpse Dao would gain new life in this body. Upon learning this, Lin Jin was overwhelmed with emotions. He mused, "This Corpse Dao is amazing. To think that he managed to come up with such a terrifying cultivation method. It's even harder to deal with than dogskin plaster." From a certain perspective, Corpse Dao cultivation method was the true secret of immortality. As long as no accidents happened, Corpse Dao could continuously infect and assimilate other living beings through corpse aura to achieve rebirth. This was true indestructibility. However, to Lin Jin, this sort of survival was no different from death. Without senses and emotions, how different was he from a walking corpse? Living like this, he might as well be dead. Looking at the current situation, Daoist Tiger seemed to be having a hard time. Perhaps he had underestimated the corpse chi of Daoist Corpse. At this moment, they were in a stalemate. However, it could be seen that without external help, the possibility of Daoist Tiger losing would be much higher. Of course, Lin Jin couldn't just watch Daoist who turned into a zombie. Invoking a spell, he used the spirit refining needle to help Daoist who refine the corpse aura. Corpse aura rampaged through Daoist whose body like a herd of wild horses that had escaped their reins, galloping recklessly. Chapter 617. Ever since he started cultivating, Lin Jin had seen and heard far more than anyone else. Even a monster like Taoist, who had lived for centuries, might not be as knowledgeable as Lin Jin. The corpse energy in Taoist, whose body was clearly unusual. It was too strong. It didn't feel like the aura of a dying man. In an instant, a thought popped into Lin Jin's mind. Was Taoist who doing this on purpose to lure Taoist who into devouring him? After all, Taoist who and Taoist who used to be brothers from the same sect. They should be familiar with each other's supernatural powers and spells. Of course, Taoist who was an exception. He must be hiding something, but he must know Taoist too well. Just like Taoist whose ability to devour foreign objects and refine them into his body, Taoist who should know about it too. Perhaps Taoist who knew he had no chance of winning, so he intentionally lured Taoist who into devouring him. As the saying went, retreat in order to advance. Then, Taoist who used the powerful corpse energy to refine Taoist who from the inside. These were all possibilities that Lin Jin suddenly thought of. Now, it didn't seem impossible. After all, the corpse energy in Taoist whose body was too strong. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that if Taoist were to rely on himself, it would be extremely difficult to defend against this corpse energy. He probably wouldn't be able to. However, if this was Taoist whose scheme, then he must have made a mistake despite his meticulous planning. He didn't expect Lin Jin to be involved. Or rather, Curator didn't know how powerful the body-casting needle was. This was where Taoist who had made a mistake. Lin Jin stabbed the Thunderfire needle into Taoist whose body as well. Together, they surrounded and suppressed the rampaging corpse energy. Under the effect of the needle, the corpse energy was gradually forced into Taoist whose right arm. Like an army being surrounded, Taoist who was forced to retreat as he fought. However, he was helpless against a stronger enemy and could only keep retreating. Lin Jin could feel the unwillingness of this corpse energy, as well as anger and fear. Sure enough, Lin Jin could tell that this corpse energy was most likely done by Taoist who on purpose. Taoist who was strong to begin with, and his internal cultivation technique was brilliant. However, Taoist whose hiding spot was extremely dangerous. No matter how powerful Taoist whose internal cultivation technique was, it was useless as Lin Jin could easily suppress the corpse energy. However, with the addition of the body-forging spirit-refining needle, things would be different. Under the spirit-refining needle, the corpse energy was constantly being suppressed and pushed back. Taoist who clearly noticed this, so he was naturally happy to have such reinforcements. He used the internal refining technique along with the spirit refining needle to chase the corpse energy into his right arm. Chapter 619. Seeing the curator stop, Patriarch Shui Pao breathed a sigh of relief. Patriarch Shui Pao was genuinely afraid. With the corpse, the insect queen, and several thousand rank 3-ant beasts, it shouldn't have been a problem to plot against the curator. But who knew that not only was the curator prepared, but he had also come up with a counterattack. Not only did he break the blood talisman in the insect queen's body, but he also killed the corpse. Now that it was 3 against 1, unless Patriarch Shui Pao used his physical strength, he could only wait for death. If he used his physical strength, he would have to release the immortal's aura from the immortal's corpse. If that happened, only death awaited the immortal devouring beast. Therefore, thinking of a way to compromise was the best path at the moment. Even surrendering and admitting defeat was not a big deal. Having dominated the world for thousands of years, Patriarch Shui Pao had no problem adapting to circumstances. Lin Jin wasn't interested in anything but that immortal devouring beast. Since Patriarch Shui Pao knew about this beast, Lin Jin really wanted to hear about it. "Tell me about the immortal devouring beast," Lin Jin asked. Patriarch Shui Pao quickly said, "If I tell you everything I know, will the curator be lenient and we'll mind our own business from now on? How about that?" "Sure," Lin Jin agreed without hesitation. Patriarch Shui Pao didn't fully trust him, but at least he had a guarantee. Moreover, if the curator went back on his word, Patriarch Shui Pao wouldn't just wait for his death. He would use a spell to trap the enemy. Once the immortal devouring beast descended, the curator and the others would be dragged in as well. In other words, if they had to die, they had to die together. This was Patriarch Shui Pao's plan. If he was forced into a corner, he could use this method to threaten the curator. In short, Patriarch Shui Pao believed that he hadn't played all his cards yet. It was best not to fall out with the curator if possible. Next, Patriarch Shui Pao used a spell to condense sand and stones to create a table and 2 stools. He then invited the curator to take a seat. After all, it was better to sit down and talk than to be at loggerheads. To put it bluntly, Patriarch Shui Pao really didn't want to go all out. If there was a chance, he would grab it. Lin Jin didn't argue and sat down. Patriarch Shui Pao then used his blood-colored silhouette to transform into an elderly man in brocade robes. He sat opposite Lin Jin with an amiable smile on his face. In his original form, Taoist Tiger stood behind Lin Jin. Ancestor Shui Pao glanced at Taoist Hu and chuckled. "Six Paths Beast, we've met before. Back then, I also knew your master, and our relationship was pretty good.